talk about that in a minute.
Okay.
The
All right.
The election is actually April 6th, I believe.
Correct.
Andrea Miller is going to come on with us and discuss this in great detail.
We're now live.
Okay, we're live, and we have, there's Andrea. Hi, Andrea.
Hey, Harvey.
How are you? Glad to see you. Oh, John Steiner's with us. Hi, John.
Hi, Andrea. Good to see you again.
Wendi, it's good to see you, Wendi Lederman. Mike Hirsch, you look a lot different. Cynthia Papermaster's with us. Hi, Cynthia. We're going to tape in a minute so we can get our radio show. We have a really big agenda today, and we also are going to be joined in the second hour by a serious heavy hitter, Ray McGovern. He's also a very cool guy. Thanks to Cynthia Papermaster there. Cynthia, if you'll we'll get on the stool, we'll throw you a fish. Anyway, sorry. You look mystified. For those of you who are worried about my voice, I've had a cold for the last week, as Nancy Naparco explained. It's been raining in California for the last 2 weeks, and it's astounding. The only time I've been out of the house the last 10 days has been to go see if I had COVID or the flu, which I don't. And today is the first day I'm feeling decent. Okay, does anyone else have anything really earth-shattering to bring up before we go on the radio? Tatanka, it's great to see you. Larry Bernstein, good to see you with us. George Ripley in DC. I haven't heard from, if anybody's heard from Joel Siegel lately, let me know, please. John Steiner, Mazel Tov on heading out to Maui. We're trying to start a grassroots there, so if you've got time to do some organizing, that'd be great. Greg Schwartz is joining us. Greg Schwartz, where are you? Greg Schwartz has just come in. All right, well, let's get ready to rumble here. And
I'm in San Rafael.
Okay, that's what I figured. Oh, you're in San Rafael. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so we are at we've got 50 people, and we have an incredibly full agenda. And so let's get ready to roll here. Dave, Steve, or Mike, if you want to take us to recording, that would be great.
They already are recording.
God, people. Get it together.
Stephen, are you set to record?
Are we ready to rock and roll, guys?
Hold on just a second, Harvey. Stephen, are you there? I'm not hearing from Stephen. Yeah, we need him to record. He's the host.
Oh yeah, we're on a new link, everybody, as I think you know, and so we have a little more freedom. We can handle up to 1,000 people on any one of our Zooms. I got to spend a little more money on it because basically I'm an optimist, but we have that capacity, and we have more control now, so we don't interrupt the flow over at the Progressive Democrats and vice versa. Hey everybody, this is Harvey Sluggo Wasserman joining you back after President's Day for the 127th Green Grassroots Emergency Election Protection Coalition Zoom call. We have a full house, more than 50 people, almost 60 to start, and we have a powerful 2 hours to discuss some of the most important things facing our country. We're going to start with the great Andrea Miller of the Center for Common Ground. We're going to talk about, as Ruth Strauss brought up earlier, a very, very crucial state Supreme Court race. I wish we had races to elect the U.S. Supreme Court it would be a very different world. But we only elect them on the state levels now. And there is a critical race coming up, which will determine the nature of the Wisconsin Supreme Court. And Andrea Miller is with us. We're going to talk in the second hour. We're going to talk about the referenda. We had a discussion 2 weeks ago, an early discussion of the nature of state referenda, and the interim are inimitable and indomitable Wendi Lederman did some really groundbreaking research on the nature of referenda in the United States, and has laid out the basics of where we can do referenda, where we can do constitutional amendments, where we can do overrides and other things. And so Wendy's going to present that document. And John, in an earlier discussion today, John Steiner mentioned there is a group that does focus on referenda, which is great. And hopefully we can coordinate with them going forward. We want to discuss a national strategy of doing state referenda. We also want to talk about the dual catastrophe in Ohio, the radiation, there you go, the chemical spill from the train, and also the trial of the purchased legislation we have, and everybody should write this down. The cost of renting or buying the Ohio legislature is $61 million. That's been ascertained. And so there is a trial going on about that. Anybody want to buy a legislature? It might be more in California, might be less in South Carolina, but at least we have a benchmark to buy a legislature. Then in the second hour, we're going to be joined by the great Ray McGovern. Ray is a legend in American history. He was a very high officer in the CIA, that's Central Intelligence Agency, daily briefing the presidents and leaders of the military during the Vietnam War. And he left the CIA, has lived to tell about it, but has a tremendous number of stories to tell about our Central Intelligence Agency and what they do and don't do. And so we're going to start with him talking about Julian Assange, with whom he's a personal friend, and the campaign to release Julian Assange. That'll be starting at 6 and Eastern, 3 Pacific. And then we want to talk about the upcoming election. And then he has very strong opinions about what's going on in Ukraine and Russia. And we have avoided that discussion because just because. And so once he gets into it, all bets are off, and he really is opinionated about it. So it's going to be a very interesting second hour. And Ray McGovern is someone who's been a hero in this country for many decades. So we're very honored to have him with us. That's starting at 3 p.m. Pacific. Meanwhile, let's start now. We want to talk about referenda in a couple of minutes, but first we want to talk about this incredibly important state Supreme Court race. It used to be nobody nationwide paid attention or cared to state Supreme Court races. And all of a sudden, all eyes are on Wisconsin. It's not just us. As Ruth mentioned, there's been a primary. A very progressive woman has won the Democratic nomination, and being Wisconsin, her name is completely unpronounceable. But the Republican guy,
Protazewicz, really?
Go ahead.
Protazewicz.
One more time.
Protazewicz.
Okay.
There you go.
Has anybody on this call ever met a person named Protazewicz? Okay, there you go. Anyway, there recently was a Supreme Court race in Wisconsin, which the Democrats completely blew off, didn't pay any attention. Now people are paying attention. I am thrilled to announce that Andrea Miller's Center for the Common Ground is on the ground in Wisconsin. So, Andrea, can you tell us the nature of this race, why it's so important, and what you're doing in Wisconsin? Thank you.
Hey, thank you very much, Harvey, and everybody. I'm going to be brief. The race in Wisconsin for the Supreme Court, the primary was on February 21st. And there were 4 candidates running so that 2 of them could be on the ballot. Now, anybody from California, you're familiar with the term jungle primary. So that meant that there were 2 progressives and there were 2 conservatives. So we could have ended up with 2 conservatives or 2 progressives, but instead we ended up with 1 of each. Now, this is what is really, really interesting about that race. Judge Janet Protasiewicz took a very big chunk out of that race. She won 46.5%. If we add the percentage of the other progressive to hers, that means the progressive justice vote took 54% of that Supreme Court race. So very, very, very important. On April 4th, we will have the actual election with Judge Janet Protasiewicz and Judge Dan Kelly. I mean, it's really, really great. So, I mean, if you want to think of it as Judge Janet and Judge Dan, I mean, it's a man and a woman. That really simplifies it. But we've had to teach our paid phone bankers and all of our phone bankers how to say Protasiewicz. All right. It's got a musical flow to it. So when you get into the rhythm, you can really say it. Now,
Well, the problem is, I understand, Andrea, in Wisconsin, if you show up at the poll and you try to vote for her and you don't pronounce her name properly, they won't count your vote. Is that true?
Mercifully, no, it isn't, because otherwise virtually no one would get to vote. She even made a video teaching people how to pronounce her name. So anyway, why is this Supreme Court race in Wisconsin important? It's very important because the Wisconsin Supreme Court in the summer is probably going to hear a case pertaining to, will Wisconsin completely outlaw abortion? Will they uphold a law that's been on their books since the 1800s before women can vote? So that's one thing the court will be voting on. The Wisconsin legislature is completely conservative, and they have been working since 2010. We all remember Scott Walker, dare I say that name, to basically make voting harder. So one of the things that we have to really teach our phone bankers when we're talking to voters and they tell us that they want to vote by mail, is we immediately have to explain the laws have changed. There are no drop boxes in Wisconsin. None, absolutely none. You can, if you don't mail your ballot, you can bring your ballot to an early voting location while it's open. And you can only bring your ballot. We heard all of this lot from North Carolina. So voting laws are basically potentially going to be made worse, making it harder to vote, or we may stop it and then begin to roll Wisconsin back to something that makes sense. Wisconsin is an extremely gerrymandered state. The Republican legislature made sure they would continue to get elected and reelected. So the court will have an opportunity to rule on those last redistricting maps. So that is why Wisconsin is important. And then we have the upcoming 2024 election. Wisconsin is one of those states that has passed a law which basically says if we don't like who our people elect, then we're going to overturn it. And as you all know, we don't elect the president directly. The president is elected by the Electoral College. So we will replace the legislators from the party that we don't like with our own legislators. Those are just 4 of the cases that we expect the Wisconsin Supreme Court to rule on. And right now, the court is tied 3 progressive, 3 conservative. And we have the opportunity to break that tie. So I am inviting people, I'm dropping a link in the chat to come and phone bank with us. Now, we are 501c, so all of our phone banking work is nonpartisan. Why is that important? It is important because the party and most progressive organizations are reaching out to consistent voters. So that means the inconsistent Black voters are not even going to get a phone call. When we made calls into Wisconsin for the primary, the people that we spoke directly to and or the people who answered us via our text had no idea this election was even there. If people don't know the election is there, guess what? They're not going to show up and vote in it. So we're working with a local group. It's called Souls to the Polls. And what they do is they provide rides to the polls for folks that live in the city of Wisconsin.
City of Milwaukee.
The city of Milwaukee, 90% of the Black people who live in Wisconsin live in and around Milwaukee. So Milwaukee is a very, very, very important place. A Republican election official bragged that he had disenfranchised 37,000 Black and Hispanic voters in Milwaukee for the 2022 election. Mandela Barnes lost his statewide race by 27,000 votes. So the work that we are doing in Milwaukee on the phones is critical. Our postcard team is also working. We've already delivered 193,000 addresses. We went back, we picked up Hispanic voters, and we are postcarding Milwaukee, Racine, Madison, and if we get more people, we currently have 228,000 addresses. We will postcard the smaller areas of Wisconsin. So that's what we're about. So please join us. Our theory of change is people that are consistent voters are going to vote. You win by bringing out those extra voters that people weren't expecting to participate. And as I said, if people don't know the election is there, they're probably not going to vote in it. Thanks, Harvey. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Do you have people on the ground knocking doors, and are there democracy centers in Wisconsin?
Wisconsin is a bridge too far in theory for a democracy center, although we just opened our first one in Manhattan. We have a great partner in Milwaukee, Souls to the Polls. So conceivably there might be a possibility that we try to do something permanent in Milwaukee. But again, what we know about the voters in Milwaukee, and again, I'm going back to the 1960s with my two Chicago uncles who were aldermen. When you are turning out the community of color vote, tell them where the voting is and be prepared to give them a ride to vote so that they know they have a way to get there. So that's one of the other things that we're working on. Phone banking, postcards. Yes, we will text again, but that will be in April when we are closer to the election. And I will be designing materials for hanging on doors, letting voters know where the early voting locations are, giving them the phone number of the Milwaukee City Clerk, all the things that we were so successful with in Virginia and Georgia.
Fantastic. I do want to suggest to the Democrats next time, if they want to nominate somebody with an unpronounceable name in Wisconsin, they should try Antetokounmpo. That would work better.
That's
Anyway,
also very musical. It's very musical. You can
that's right.
dance
They
to
should
it.
see the movie. Will you've put your contacts, please, in the chat. How do people get in touch with you, and how do they donate? And where do they get their postcards?
All right. I am putting the website in the chat. I'm also going to give you a link to doing postcards. So we have a video and all the information about what you're going to need about postcarding at that link. Again, remember, we are nonpartisan, but our message is going to voters who probably don't know there's an election, letting them know there's an election, and we're also letting them know what they're voting for. So we're not just saying vote for this person. We've substituted with why you're voting. You're voting for democracy, and you're voting for voting rights, and you want to protect a woman's right to choose. All that is in our postcard script, if you can believe that.
Sure, absolutely. Well, listen, this is obviously a template for how we're going to move into 2024. This is an incredibly critical election, and the good news is that much of the constituency that needs to be informed is right there in Milwaukee. So, Carla Sand, you have a hand? Carla Sand, we have 80 people on the call. I want to welcome a new group of us, people who are subscribers to the Columbus Free Press and freepress.org. You've been invited to join us. I think some of you may have. It's great to have you with us. Someone asked, do we meet every Monday? We do, except we do take national holidays, just to not interfere with people's lives. Carla, did you, and I want to welcome our listeners on Progressive Radio Network, and you at Progressive Radio Network who are listening in can't see the chat. So Andrea, will you be very explicit verbally as how people get in touch with you for our radio listeners?
Hey, everybody, you can reach me directly by email at Andrea at Center for Common Ground. That's Andrea, ANDREA, at Center, FOR, commonground.org. And when you're on our website, if you go to actions, there will be a page for writing postcards. There'll be another page for making phone calls. And every Tuesday at 6 p.m., we run a national guided phone bank. So if you've never phone banked using our system, there will be people who will train you how to use it. And they're very, very kind, they're very, very sweet, and they're very, very patient. And remember, we are not selling candidates. We are providing voters with information on how they can participate in democracy. The reaction is going to be very, very different than what you may have experienced calling for a political campaign.
Great, fantastic, thank you. We had someone's hand and then she disappeared. Steve, do you have who raised her hand there? Okay, Jeffrey will give you 5 seconds.
Carla.
Oh, Carla, where is she?
I don't
Carla,
know.
do you have Carla? Did she disappear? Okay, I think one thing I have to say, and I do want to vent here, I thought Mandela Barnes was a great candidate, would have made a great U.S. Senator. I am being not party partisan, but candidate partisan. And I'm astonished that Ron Johnson is back. And I think that the Democratic Party completely, I can't imagine what they did or didn't do to lose that race. It's incomprehensible. So it would appear
Didn't turn out the black vote.
well, there you go. So this again, in terms of voter turnout for 2024, how in 2022 the Democratic Party could completely ignore grassroots campaigning and lose a Senate seat like that is completely astounding to me, and should be a real cautionary tale as to what we're dealing with here. The idea of bringing out people at the grassroots apparently has not occurred to the Democratic Party yet after 250 years. But, 2024 is going to have its own mountain to climb. So we'll leave it at that. Carla, did you have your hand? Carla Sand, I see an email and a hand, but I don't see a person.
No, you won't see a person. I don't do that. But this is Carla, and I'm from Minnesota. And I'd like to let the speaker know that in Minnesota, we usually know everything that's happening in Wisconsin. And we have not heard a word about this on any of my political calls. I'm just wondering, we did a lot of work for Wisconsin during the Walker days. And I haven't heard a word from anything requesting us to come over and make calls or do whatever you're doing to get out the vote. What's happening?
Well, number one, I am in Virginia, not in Wisconsin. What I have seen is the Democratic Party has put out the call to national progressive groups. Now, did they reach out to me? No, but they did reach out to other national progressive groups. And again, they are doing outreach to consistent Democratic voters. Frequently these days, Black, Hispanic voters, they're not registering as Democrats, so they're not going to get a call. Generally, because they don't get calls, Black and Hispanic voters are not consistent voters. So again, there's that double, they're not going to get a call. So I call those voters.
It's mind-boggling the ways that they can then lose it. I heard a rumor that Minnesota was going to invade Wisconsin and make people nicer. Is that true? Sorry, I would want to say you did getting a call from. Thank you, Carla. Getting a call from Minnesota reminds us that in terms of grassroots campaigning, Keith Ellison, the re-elected Attorney General of Minnesota, was written off by the Democrats by every pundit who was commenting on the 22 election, was predicting that Keith Ellison would lose. And he won handily. And it has to be entirely attributable to grassroots campaigning. Would you agree with that, Andrea?
Yes. Keith organized so much of his own campaign. He did outreach to basically anybody that could vote for him. I mean, we all know what we thought of those guys and girls in college that were only looking for the sure thing. Well, it doesn't really get any better in politics. You've got to go out and bring everybody into democracy and remind them that democracy needs everybody. So if you've been gone for a while, that's okay. We want you to come back now and really be a part of it.
Yes, and as Andrea well knows, the Keith Ellison, who we've known for a long, long time, he's been on the show at least twice, is a grassroots guy. And had he relied on TV and the other traditional campaigning methods, he most definitely would have been crushed. He was running against a very, very powerful, very, very wealthy opponent that everybody thought was gonna win.
Well,
Carla,
and
did you
again,
want to say-
we have to be aware that all this money on TV ads doesn't necessarily translate into votes. It's the grassroots direct outreach talking to people. They're spending all that money in Wisconsin, and the people we're talking to didn't even know there was an election.
Thank you, Carl. I think Carl wants her camera turned off, if you can do that, Steve. Did you want to say anything further, Carla? There you go. You're back. Thank you for calling us from Minnesota.
There, I'm
There
ready.
you go. Okay.
Okay, I don't want you to see my picture, but I want to tell you that I'm a DFLer in Minnesota, and I'm going to tell you it wasn't necessarily grassroots, if you're all thinking that. It was a whole lot of party politics that did that. And we were all worried that he was not going to win, of course, but it was narrow. It was narrow. And so the grassroots is not always it. I hate to say that, even though I'm the grassroots person.
It's very much a part of it, though, because we look at where is the party not going, and then we go there.
Good. Carla, thank you for that. We can always count on a Minnesotan to clear things up. If anyone wants to see a great movie about Minnesota, by the way, it's called New in Town with Renee Zellweger. Very funny. New in Town, completely out of the blue, but go ahead and take a look at it. Ruth and then Dorothy. Ruth Strauss and then Dorothy Reich. Ruth, are you unmuted?
And
Okay.
now I am. Andrea, first of all, congratulations on your great work. I'm embarrassed to say this, but what happened with the McClellan race?
Oh, well, thank you for bringing us to that other race on February 21st. Virginia sent the first Black woman, I know it's 2023. We sent our first
All
Black
right.
woman to Congress in 2023. Now, in November 2022, Don McEachin won the district, and he took 64% of the vote out of the district. We never worked in the district when Don was alive because Don was known, Don was loved. People didn't know Jen. We worked on her race. We contacted 35,000 voters. Jen took 74% of the vote
Wow.
out of that district, 92% out of Petersburg. She's a Petersburg girl. 90% out of Richmond, 81% out of Henrico. And she won 13 of the 15 jurisdictions in that district.
Fantastic. And for people who don't know, and I only know this because of Andrea, she was running against an African-American male who was a preacher and was for subsidizing with public funds religious schools, an election denier, and not for women's rights either. So, and I learned all that from Andrea. I'm not smart, but anyway, Andrea, I know your organization is nonpartisan, But I want to know, anyway, if you have any ideas. Obviously the Republicans get their money, where they need to get it and get people out. Do you have any ideas on what Democrats can do? I mean, they have just shot themselves in the foot, like Val Demings in Florida. And, they've just done so many things wrong. Ray McClendon has told us that they didn't help out at all in Georgia. So I'm just wondering if you have any ideas. I mean, you're the best thing to combat that, but we need more.
Well, one of the things that happens with the party is the Democratic Party and the Republican Party both raise far too much money from corporations and corporate donors. The Republican Party makes sure that money goes down to their candidates. So in Virginia, once you get the Republican nomination, even for state house, you automatically get $100,000 from the Republican Party. If you are the Democratic nominee, and I've been the Democratic nominee, you don't get bupkis. You get nothing. The other issue is in the Democratic Party, they love to hire their consultants. It is the consultant industrial complex. So money goes to the consultants buy radio and TV ads. Why? Because they're going to get a kickback on all that money that they spend.
That's
So
disgusting.
there's plenty of money in the Democratic Party.
That's just awful.
It is how they choose to spend it.
Well, thank
Very
God
good,
for
very
you
good.
being there. You're the combatant against that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. Dorothy Reich?
Well, I wanted to change the subject, but before I do that, I just wanted to mention that in case anybody's interested, Ryan Grimm has an incredible podcast on Deconstructed about the influence of how the Democratic Party destroys progressives using AIPAC and other big money organizations. And they focus a little bit about Maxwell Frost, which is interesting. And also how Sam Bankman-Fried is involved, the crypto guys, and it's all very interesting. But I ask Andrea while she's here, what do you think about this jury foreman who seems to be so ignorant? She never voted, and she was thrilled to meet what's his name, Giuliani, and she thought Lindsey Graham was just charming and wonderful. And what's going on in Georgia?
I'm not looking at any of that yet. Virginia and Wisconsin, that's where my focus is. We had an election on Sunday. The election was announced on Thursday. So we did turnout for an election on Sunday. 6,500 people showed up on a Sunday afternoon to vote for Senator Jen McClellan's replacement.
Yeah, that's an incredible win. I was just wondering what your take was, because you're from Georgia. What do you think about this?
I am not from Georgia. I am from Virginia.
Okay.
And
I'm
I
sorry.
originally ran for that 4th district seat.
Mhm.
Jen credits
Right.
me as one of the candidates that paved the way for her. So we
That
are
You
thrilled.
won by a huge margin. Huge.
Yes, 74%.
Crazy.
This
Nobody wins.
was the first race. Now, this is the third time Reverend Leon Benjamin had run. He actually conceded this race. Now, in the old days, 74% victory, that is what my mother would call an ass whooping.
Well, let's do the math here. You say this is the first African-American woman from Virginia to go to the U.S. Congress.
Yes.
And when did the first African-American woman come to Virginia? Is this like
Yeah, we were
like
here in the
300
1700s. We were some of the first to arrive. We
no,
were
you're
on
in
the
the
first boat.
1600. That's the
That's right.
1600.
1619.
So it's only 430 years 400 years that it took for African-American women to get off the boat and into the Congress.
And
Congratulations.
into
on that.
federal
Or
office.
I think the African term is Mazel Tov. Wendi Lederman, you got something?
Thank you. Thanks for that. And I love when Andrea gets a little edgy. It's great on you. Yeah, it's fantastic, and we're so happy to have you back with us. Yeah. Just two quick things. One, I have to credit Hetty Tripp for sending an update to our group about Minnesota just allowed the legislature actually allowed the felons to get their voting rights back, which is fantastic. It's a Jim Crow thing, yeah, and most places do it, but certain places don't. In Florida, when we had it on the ballot and it was bipartisan, huge majority thought it's important to give civil rights back. That was in Florida, 1.3 million people that were going to probably be more liberal, and let's face it, we have more people in prison than anywhere else on the planet, and it's disproportionately African Americans. That's just the fact. So we can infer what that means. So that's a shift in the right direction. And I just to back up everything that Andrea is saying about the movement of money and the way that the DNC is handling things in Florida. They just appointed Nikki Fried to head the Democratic Party. And that was when everyone's met. Yeah. And she's I say she's blue on the outside, red on the inside. She's friends with Matt Gaetz. She really split the vote during the governor's race. She attacked Crist more than she did DeSantis. So by the time, the actual election came around, people weren't engaged to actually go out and vote because it wasn't a presidential race. And it's really hard to get Democrats to the polls if it's not, the 4-year thing. And so, when we had a really great progressive candidate, you guys met Carolina Ampudia, she's a friend of mine, and she had tons of endorsements, but she was getting shunned from every engagement and reach out. And they installed somebody that's just going to hold the door open for the opposition. And the DNC likes to go to sleep during the election season. They think it's hibernation. So I just wanted to mention that it's really important to have the grassroots.
Yeah, thank you for that. Of course, you understand that if felons can vote in Florida, that means Trump is going to be able to cast a ballot in 24. So just be careful on that.
No.
Anyway.
We're not allowing people to vote from prison, Harvey.
Oh, why not? Oh, anyway, okay. All right. So listen, we still have 80 people with us. Fantastic. Andrea, it's always an honor to have you with us. We do want to get to some other topics, but Cynthia Papermaster has raised her hand. I don't know if you two know each other. Andrea and Cynthia, you should be in touch with each other. Cynthia is with Code Pink in the Bay Area.
Hi.
So there you go.
Hi, Cynthia. I've known Medea for years.
Medea is a Code Pink member as well.
So did you want to say something? Cynthia?
I do. I just want to say that I attended Barbara Lee's campaign kickoff rally in Oakland yesterday, and I want to encourage people to look at her candidacy. I know this is a nonpartisan meeting, but I noticed a lot of talk about Democratic Party politics in this meeting, and I hope she gets to the Senate. I just want to add that she's will be the only Black woman in the U.S. Senate if she gets elected to Senate. That's all I want to say. That's all I want to say.
As a historian, I want to point out very quickly, then we're going to go to Ohio and get you off the hook, Andrea. But I can't, with Barbara Lee, who I've met a number of times, there are instances in American history where one person did something that no one else would do. In World War, on December 8th, 1941, Jeanette Reagan was the one person in the U.S. Congress, in either house, who voted against going to war after Pearl Harbor. She's also the only one who voted against World War I as well. And there were 50 who voted against World War I. She had just been elected the first woman to the U.S. Congress, and the first vote she cast is against getting into World War I. The Senator Russ Feingold from Wisconsin was the only senator to vote against the Patriot Act. And Barbara Lee, there are some others, but Barbara Lee is the only one who voted against the Iraq War. The only one in the U.S. Congress. Oh, you're shaking your head. No, it's It is true. There-
Sluggo, no, she voted against the Afghanistan war.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, the Afghanistan war. Thank you, Mike. Thank you for that. And she took a ton of, she got tremendous hate mail from it, but she has continued to be reelected. And I'm glad she's running for U.S. Senate. So thank you for that. Andrea, is there anything else? Thank you, Cynthia. Anything else, Andrea? Okay, so everybody, we are going to continue every week to have a short section on Wisconsin. This is an incredibly important race. It could actually determine the presidency of the United States, because if the Wisconsin Supreme Court has an anti-democracy majority, the votes from Wisconsin could go anywhere, and they could in fact change the country. There was the situation when you mentioned Scott Walker. The situation in Wisconsin has just been mind-boggling for the last 20 years. And this is actually the linchpin of the whole deal. So remember, not only take Andrea's contacts, but send them to other people as well, please. Okay? And it's Andrea Miller at Center for Common Ground.
No, just Andrea at Center for Common Ground. I'm putting it in the chat again.
Yes.
And Andrea
at centerforcommonground.org. Yes. Go ahead.
Did you want to make a closing statement?
No.
No, she did.
Thank you so much, Andrea.
Okay,
thanks,
Mark.
everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Okay, and good luck in Wisconsin. As people who went to Michigan, both Nancy and I will be rooting for Wisconsin in a month. The election, I believe, is April 6th. So there you go. Now we want to turn to the issue of referenda, and then we're going to talk about Ohio. We only got 14 minutes to do it, but we can do it. I asked Wendi Lederman to compile a definitive list of information on referenda, statewide referenda rights in the United States, which is about half the country. Wendi, can you give us a quick link and tell us what you found?
Sure, I'm grabbing that link for you right now. So yeah, the importance of referendum is particularly that it really comes down to the citizens' ability to have control over their government. Sorry for the noise. So when you pass a referenda, particularly a constitutional amendment, the legislature basically can't override it. And there are several types of initiatives and referenda. You can have direct and indirect, which the direct is when the legislature can't step in, which is like what we have in Florida here. And then there are other ones where once you gather enough petition signatures, then it has to kind of get approved by the legislature. And there's different ways that the legislature can sometimes step in, and this is in particular places, and they can kind of amend it, or they can do competing initiatives. But sorry, it's a little difficult for me to multitask here, but let me get you.
Okay, so what we want to know is if you'll put up the list. Steve, can you post
I got it.
What she's got there?
Yeah, that's right there.
There are 24 states, I believe, is it 24 or 25 in the United States, where with very large amounts of signatures, you can get on the ballot. Sometimes you have to jump through the Supreme Court, the state Supreme Court, sometimes through the legislature. Usually the Attorney General and the Secretary of State also get their grips on it one way or another. We had referenda in Ohio on a bailout for a nuclear plant. Both the Secretary of State and the Attorney General messed with it, made sure there wasn't enough time to get signatures. They actually physically intimidated signature gatherers in Ohio on this referendum to repeal the nuclear bailout. Physical assaults on our signature gatherers in Ohio. We can expect that. But the bottom line is, on the other side, in Michigan in 2020 or 22, the signature, more than 750,000 signatures were gathered to put a pro-choice amendment on the Constitution. And this, of course, is and it won overwhelmingly by, I believe, more than 60%. And this, of course, affects an entire election. If you are in the business of gathering signatures, 6, 8, 10 months out from an election, you're going to have to build a grassroots organization. And that grassroots organization is going to carry into the election. It's no accident that Michigan is now a very different place politically than it was before the last election. And the referendum certainly had a hand in that. So what we're talking about here is referenda in about 24 states, the possibility of doing it, particularly on 4 issues. A choice, which is obvious, pot, legalized pot. I believe only 2 states have turned down referenda on pot. Extending Medicaid benefits, which is a big deal, and I think is an issue in Florida, as Wendi, and gerrymandering. All the anti-gerrymandering referenda have passed. They've trashed it in Ohio with the legislature. It is not a popular thing they're doing, and we're gonna have to find a way around that. But we won in Ohio twice, and then there are other issues as well. So, Wendi, can you show us the list?
Yeah, I mean, if you want, I can do a quick little screen share.
Please,
And,
very quickly.
Yeah, you got it. And so, yeah, and I'll give an example too of just in Florida a couple of years ago. I worked for sorry, I'm a little so this is the link and you can download it. But I do want to give just a quick example of the intimidation, because we've had ballot initiatives that I've worked on to end the monopoly of FP&L and the utilities. And I've been followed in the field. I've had to call security several times for people recording me and just trying to intimidate me, because that's the power that these things have. And it's true that things have to go through and get constitutional review of the Supreme Court and the state attorney generals. And here in this list, it'll show what each state has to do to get these things on the ballot. And forgive me, I'm having a little bit of dental issues, so my sleep is I'm a little slow.
You're fine. You're fine.
Thank
just
you.
You're doing great.
So this is just basically defining what the initiative processes are, because there's also something called a veto referendum. So if the legislature puts forth a law, like say banning abortions, the citizens can
Stop right here. No, go to the list with the one that has the states that can do it.
I'm going to show you something else right here. It's okay. A little bit better. So
good. Yeah.
That, and then I have this here as well. So this is all the states of what kinds they can do. But this right here, these are all hyperlinks. And if you click on those, this tells you how many signatures. So this is for a constitutional amendment right here. This is to change a state statute. And then this is a veto referendum. If you want to the legislature creates a law that the citizens don't agree with, they can veto it through referendum. And so this is all the amounts of signatures needed with the hyperlinks to each state that will give you a link of much more detail on the process of creating one, which I have down here. So this is the amount of signatures required, but I want to show you these are the states right here, and the list that I've actually compiled and gone through, which summarizes what those hyperlinks would lead to, right? So these are for each of the 26 states plus Washington, D.C. So this is to credit where I'm getting a lot of this information. This came from Ballotopia, Wikipedia, and then there's also at the bottom of each state, there's the link to the actual law and in the statute and the amendment for that state that will give you specific straight from the source info. So this just tells you about what the restrictions are. Can a referendum be used against emergency legislation? Does it have to be restricted to only one subject? Any particular topics that it can't apply to. This is how you go about applying, just the whole process of it. And can the legislature alter it? Do you can you reattempt an initiative if it fails? What are the distribution requirements? What are the deadlines? What are the effective dates? And here are the laws at the bottom, and that's for every state. And I do want to say real quick about the distribution requirements, because I found there's some interesting little quirks to these that I discovered as I'm researching. Like, say, Mississippi can technically, they have the ability to create a ballot amendment, but when they drafted the amendment that allowed it, they did it so that you had to have a distribution of a certain percentage in all 5 congressional districts. Well, apparently they lost the congressional district, so it's physically impossible now for people to put anything on the ballot because there aren't 5 districts. And in Florida, they've made it so that you have to have 8% in each congressional district, where it's just a lot higher than opposed to having counties, or the way that they've judged it. There's also different super majorities. Once it gets on the ballot, sometimes you have to have, like in Florida, you have to have 60%, and the legislature just made it so that we're going to have 67% of voter turnout apply for something, even if it gets 900,000 signatures on to get it onto the ballot. So this basically just shows for each of the 26 states that are listed above what you'd have to do, what type of referenda or initiative is allowed, and just everything that that it takes to do it. And then if you click on either this link here, it gives a little more detail, and then the actual law is down here at the bottom for which laws govern that, and that's for each state. So thank you, Harvey.
Wow, that's a fantastic document you've created, Wendi. We want to thank you for it.
Thank you.
Hopefully it'll be useful all the way through 24. John Steiner have talked a bit about this. So there is a group that does referenda. What's the name of the group? John? Hold on, you're muted. There you go. I think. There.
Harvey, I put it in chat. It's called Represent Us, represent.us. They've been at this for 10 years, and their theory of change has been working at the state level.
Fantastic. Wendi, if you'll get in touch with that group, that'd be great.
Wendi, I'm happy to do an intro, and we can do some emailing back and forth.
Sounds great. Yeah, reach out to me, John. Thank you so much. And I want to say thank you to Harvey for having this wonderful idea. I know a few people that work in the business of getting amendments on the ballot, and they're just so appreciative that this resource will be available. So I was really happy to do it, and I appreciate it.
Oh, you did a great job. Thank you so much. And be in touch with them, please. And we'll have them come. They're in Western Mass, John, is that right?
They're located in Western Mass, yeah.
Yeah, no, along with Billy Wamps, there's the usual hotbed of social change. Colleen, Klein, you had a hand, and then I want to say goodbye to my Progressive Radio Network listeners, by the way. The hour is up. If you want to see the rest of this will continue for another hour at least. Go to electionprotection2024.org, electionprotection2024.org for the next hour. Go ahead, Colleen Klein.
Hey, I'm pretty new to this, but I wanted to join. And like Wendi, I'm also in Florida for the last 4 or 5 years. So I actually wanted to ask Wendi a question because it's pretty confusing to me. So I need some clarification. So like Wendi, if we wanted to get some sort of referendum on Florida's, let's say the next election, to change the abortion laws, hypothetically, how would we do that?
Well, there would be 2 ways to do it. And again, in the document, it has the actual like instructions on how to apply, like the technical, like this is you have to have, and I'd have to look at it again to show you, to say exactly for Florida, because I went through 26 of them, so I don't want to get them confused. But basically you have and for each state it's a little bit different. But you have to present the initiative basically, and Florida actually has a word count on what the summary of the ballot has to be, which is only 75 words, which was, I mean, when DeSantis got to office, one of the very first things he did was make it much harder to get a citizens initiative. He restricted petitioners and their ability to petition and everything that it took to get a measure on the ballot. But I think that there would be 2 ways to go about it. You could either create a ballot amendment Actually, you know what? We don't, I was gonna say a veto referendum, but we don't allow that in Florida. The only one in Florida that we allow is a constitutional amendment change. And I actually do have a friend that's been considering doing that. So basically, I mean, you have you get together everybody that wants to do it, you write out what you want to see on the amendment, and I would suggest like talking to a constitutional lawyer about it, because it has to go through the process of being approved for constitutional review. Are you gonna say something, Sluggo?
Yes, I think Colleen, you and Wendy should be in touch.
I was
Yeah.
about to say that if Wendy, if you could put your number, or I'll put my telephone number in the chat.
Yeah, I'll put my email in there, okay?
So what we'll do is you can use this Zoom center to start to pull people together. You've got a year and a half now, an abortion rights amendment on the 2024 ballot in Florida would be a huge deal.
It
mean, you
would.
know,
I think we win. I think
well, I'm not sure with Ron DeSantis, you can win anything, but you can absolutely change the picture of electoral politics in Florida with a constitutional amendment on the ballot in 24. I didn't mean to say that, by the way. You can beat Ron DeSantis. This is the way to do it. Absolutely. So this is the president to creation here. And you guys be in touch and start a statewide campaign.
Sounds good. Yeah, and I know people that can get in touch with that as well. And I know the one thing is you need to have a certain amount, because in Florida you need 900,000 signatures basically to get it onto the ballot, but you need about over 200,000 to trigger the constitutional review. So and they have to be in 200,000 to trigger the constitutional review, but they also have to be in, like, I think by February 1st, like, so if the elections in November, you have to have it in by February 1st that year. So we would have a year or till February.
You've got 10 months.
Yeah.
So 11
11,
months.
yeah.
So yeah. Okay, very good. George Ripley, thank you. Good to meet you, Colleen. I'm glad you're with us. George Ripley.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to work with Senator Mike Gravel for a while. And he was one of the nation's leading advocates of the ballot initiative. And in the course of that period, I became familiar with the Ballot Initiative Strategy Center. I wondered if anybody on this call had any familiarity with them. They work on strategy for ballot initiatives around the nation. But one thing that surprised me about them is that they don't advocate for the expansion of ballot initiatives, empowering the people to make laws of, by, and for ourselves in the 24 states or 25 states that don't have the ballot initiative. So that strikes me as something kind of counterintuitive, that the Ballot Initiative Strategy Center would not advocate the expansion of ballot initiative power.
Yeah, I would, that's one thing I think about is when you have certain things, like I wonder if people can pressure their legislature to create bills that would allow these things, or if they do have some sort of initiative power to create an initiative that would expand their own power.
Exactly.
So that's something I think about too. And so it's just about getting creative and kind of playing chess.
Now's the time where there's so many people. I don't know if any of you would agree with me, but I think that that democracy is one of the fastest growing and largest civil rights movements of our time. And so now would be the time to expand the ballot initiative because so many people are interested in the democracy.
It's so true. And with the constitutional amendments, like in Florida, we have kind of limited on what we can do. Like we can't do statute, we can't do veto referendum, but when you can amend your constitution, that goes above the legislature. I mean, and there are certain states where like the government, like the legislature can try, they can compete, but once it's on the constitution, like there's one that we're working on now that we had a guest on a few weeks ago for the right to clean water. And it's basically a rights of nature or rights to nature, where once it's on the ballot and it's approved and it amends the Constitution, they can't take that away. And for this, it would actually give people the power to hold the state liable if their water is polluted. And so things like Ohio, like if Ohio had something like that, like there would be way more action against the train company. So there's so many ways that it can be implemented on the ground level that gives people the power back, which is exactly like you said, democracy. I mean, that's what, like, we're seeing a corporate takeover of the government. And this is one way to take that power back to the people in a way that it can't be taken away from them. So thank you, George.
Hi there. Sorry, I had to mute for a minute. George, thank you for that. Does anyone else have questions on the referendum issue before we move to Ohio? And Steve? Steve Caruso, I gave you George Ray McGovern's number. He's holding on here. So
yeah, I got the last 4 digits I need still.
1459.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry, 703. And then the last 4, 1459. Okay. Steve, have you got him?
Yep.
Okay, please get soon you give. Okay, thank you. Just give him a call. He's waiting. Okay. So this is obviously a huge deal. Ray, I've got my guy Steve calling you right now.
All right.
Okay, he'll get you on.
What I need is something I can click on.
Okay, well, hopefully he's gonna send it to you, so we'll get you right on it. If not, call me back. Okay, technical difficulties on the side. Does anyone else have anything? As I said on the referenda, we're going to be doing this until 2024. This is a very big deal. John Steiner gave us the name of a group in Western Mass that specializes in referenda, and Wendi is going to be in touch with him. Wendi, this report is spectacular. We will publish the link and the report itself at the web, on the web. So let's deal with it that way. It will be great, and we will make a difference on this one. That's for sure. We want to go to Ohio now. I see Pat Morita is with us. 2 things are going on in Ohio that are absolutely catastrophic. The first is this train spill. Which reminds me, we had a great guest on 2 weeks ago. Reminds me very much of what happened at 3 Mile Island. I hope the people there are compiling a database for health purposes, epidemiological purposes, so they can tell us exactly what the health impacts are, which are clearly going to be catastrophic. And secondly, we have this trial going on in Columbus, Pat, which I'm sure you're following. And as I said earlier in the broadcast, we have now ascertained the purchase price of the Ohio legislature. Now, the price might be higher in California or lower in Rhode Island, but in Ohio, you can buy the Ohio legislature for $61 million. And we've had a case in, I guess is it in federal court, Pat, or is it in state court, on where Larry Householder, the speaker of the Ohio House, has been on trial for taking this bribe. Can you give us an update, or Mark Stansbury, either one of you, or both? Pat, are you unmuted here? And Mark Stansbury, do you want to comment on it?
I can say that it's kind of interesting that Larry Householder decided to plead not guilty. Maybe he didn't have a choice, but surely a whole lot of incredible intrigue has gone on in there with all these various participants and all these various phone calls and texts and things being put out.
I guess the trial is actually in Cincinnati, and I think they're on some kind of break because Householder is not well. Greg Schwartz has put something in the chat, and Greg, you have a story, counterpoint. You want to talk to us about this one before we go to talk about the spill? Greg Schwartz, are you on? Are you unmuted? Oh, there we go. There you are.
All right, here we go. Hey.
Yeah. Go
So
ahead.
yeah, real brief, I've been investigating crooked science and regulatory capture with the EPA in Ohio since I was in grad school at Kent State back in 2005-06, where activists allege a long-time cover-up of secretly dumped radioactive Cold War weapons waste at the industrial excess landfill in Uniontown, Ohio, near Canton. And this news story in East Palestine, I was motivated to write when I saw a page out of that crooked science playbook already being utilized by Norfolk Southern's contractor AECOM, which the HuffPost reported on. And so I added that to this story. Also, all the contractors, the EPA is using this company Tetra Tech. It's getting hundreds of millions of dollars of contracts from the EPA. It looks like they're farming out much of the monitoring to Tetra Tech and other contractors. Tetra Tech has another subsidiary that is being sued by the Department of Justice for what's been called the largest case of eco-fraud in American history at the former Hunters Point Naval Shipyard in San Francisco. They say, oh, that was another subsidiary with, and that was blame that on rogue employees acting on their own. I've tried to show that they actually have a history of this and point this out. And so I think we really need a congressional investigation into the crooked science and regulatory capture at EPA, which is a long time bipartisan problem. And that's what the story is all about.
And where is this story and what's the link?
It's at Counterpunch. I just posted it in the comments. It was their lead story on Friday.
Okay. All right. Well, this horrifying spill is getting worse and worse. And I see you're up there in Cleveland at the Golden Gate Bridge. Oh, wait, that's in San Francisco. Sorry. Anyway.
I'm from Cleveland and I live in the Bay Area. So.
All right. Great to see you. You can go meet Cynthia Papermaster and join up with Code Pink.
Ray McGovern is with us now.
Okay, great. All right. So this has been a very full session. This link to the situation with the referenda is a very big deal. I think you all know. Our emphasis is on protecting elections and on getting the money that goes into the corporate media to go instead to grassroots organizing. And one person who's really well qualified to talk about that is a veteran of the organization in the U.S. government that has rigged and stolen more elections than any other operation on earth. So, and we're really honored to have Ray McGovern with us. He's a legend way back to the Vietnam days, and was high up in the CIA and did briefings of presidents and defense secretaries and commanders in chiefs and all that stuff. And of course, we have a mutual acquaintance in William Westmoreland, who Ray knew, I suppose, and I debated once. He was the chief perpetrator of the war in Vietnam. And Ray has now made an incredible name for himself as a true legend in breaking with the CIA and in making public a lot of a lot of the really bad stuff that they did. I do have to warn you one thing, Ray, knowing you're Irish, that we're not allowed to use four-letter words here because we're on the radio, the 7 words. But you can, I know since you're Irish, you know Yiddish. So if you want to curse in Yiddish, you're welcome to do so. But Ray is an incredible resource. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about Julian Assange to begin with. Ray is one of the great whistleblowers, and he is a personal friend of Julian Assange. And we'd like, Ray, if you would, to update us on the attempts to free him. Then we want to talk about your ideas about, what we might be up against sub rosa in the 2024 election. and that we're all, looking forward to and organizing for. And then finally, we're going to open it up over the course of the 3 years that we've been doing these calls. We've avoided the big controversy over Russia and Afghanistan and what that all means, primarily because everybody has very conflicting ideas and will never resolve anything. But you actually know something about what's going on there, which is a rare situation, given your decades of service in foreign intelligence. And so we'll open it up at that point to a freewheeling discussion led by you on the Ukrainian war. So let's start, if we can. We have spent a lot of time with very, very good people talking about Julian Assange and this threat to journalism and the flow of public information. There is a picture of you somewhere with him, but nonetheless, please tell us what you want, whatever you want to say, and whatever you can tell us. And these 80 people that are with us are ready activists and willing to pump in. And if you want to put your the links that will be helpful in the chat, you're welcome to do so. So take it away, please, Ray McGovern.
Thanks, Harvey. And are all these good folks from California?
No. We're multi-geographic here.
I see the Golden Gate Bridge there behind one person. Well, right. Listen, I'm really happy that you invited me to do this. How long will we have, Harvey?
Well, technically, we go to the top of the hour, but
okay.
we've known that we stay longer if you want.
Okay. Well, sorry about the link, but we're all set now. Let me say a word about Julian, my good friend, Julian Assange. I met him first when after we had given him the Sam Adams Award for Integrity and Intelligence. He was very grateful for the award. His mother, in particular, was happy that he was given our award, as well as many others. So was Ed Snowden's family when we gave him the award. When we met Julian first, you'll see if you go to my Twitter page, you'll see a picture of several of us, veteran intelligence professionals for sanity. First time we met Julian at the Ecuadorian embassy there in London, and we had a wonderful, wonderful dinner there. It was an incredible crowd of justice people. One thing I remember, and it gives you an idea of how young and how clued in Julian was. We were waiting in the little ante room there, and he comes in the door, and I was right next to the door, and I extend my hand. I said, "Now, Julian, Ray McGovern." He looked at me, he says, "Well, I know." Oh. I said, "Oh, you read my stuff?" He said, "I don't read your stuff. I see you on YouTube." Clue, folks. If you want to reach anybody below 45, they don't give a rat's patootie about what you write, no matter how cleverly crafted it is. You gotta be seen, you gotta be heard. So I've learned that. And thank God I've been given the gift of the gab. I've kissed the Blarney Stone no fewer than 3 times. And,
I kissed it once.
All right. Well, once is usually not enough.
Oh, no.
No, yeah. So, and my Irish descent makes me rather garrulous, I guess is the word. And I like to brag about being Irish. Somebody was criticizing the British Empire the other day, and I raised my hand and I was recognized. And I finally said, "Well, I want to tell you what my Irish grandfather told me about the British Empire." And they thought, "Oh, what is it, McGovern?" I said, "Well, he said, Raymond, sit down now. I'll tell you. Do you know why the sun never sets on the British Empire?" And I said, "Well, yeah." I said, "You don't know. I'll tell you. the sun never sets on the British Empire because the good Lord would never trust the British in the dark. I got uncles to say, you know, except for the ugly ones, the Irish are the most beautiful race on earth. So on that note, let's get down to business. Julian is the most extraordinary person, among the most extraordinary persons I've ever met. He's so bright. He's not a hail fellow, well-met person. He's a little bit taciturn, but man, he's a decent individual, and he cares about justice, and he cares about truth, and he figured a way to get the truth out into our computers through something called the ether. And you know the result. We learn all kinds of things about Afghanistan, about Iraq, about our diplomacy that we'd never know otherwise. The way they do, long story short, they got him. How did they get him? Well, right after he was given our award, and right after he released what I think were the Afghan papers, he was in Sweden. Now, an arrow in the quiver of intelligence operatives is call him a rapist. Always works. Call him a rapist. Long story short, Julian slept with 2 Swedish women, consensual, but apparently the condom broke on one, and she was very disturbed. She wanted to make sure that she wasn't going to get AIDS. So she and her companion went to the police and said, well, can we force Mr. Assange to get an AIDS test? And the police took that, gave a story to the Swedish press the next day. Julian Assange was a rapist. All contrived. And we know it was all contrived because Niels Melzer, the UN rapporteur for torture, initially reluctant to take up Julian's case, but he went and visited him in Belmarsh, the maximum security prison in London, found him to have been tortured psychologically, and decided, I'm going to really look into this. He goes to Sweden, right? And it must have been that the Swedish authorities didn't think that this Swiss German would know Swedish. He did. In his family are Swedish people, and he was fluent in Swedish as well. He read the documents, and so it was all a big frame up. The Dutch police and intelligence people doing this on the behalf of, oh, I don't know, you guess it, huh? You guess it. But that's how they got him, and that's important because I was talking to Cy Hirsch 2 days ago, and I said, you know, Cy, don't sleep with any Swedish women. And he chuckled, 85 years old as he is. And I don't think he has to worry too much about them, but they'll get him on something else, okay? The smearing has already begun. So in sum, this is the most important thing happening in press matters in my lifetime, okay? More important than the Supreme Court decision on the Vietnam papers. Why? Because if this goes through, if Julian is put away forever, the lesson will go out loud and clear to any journalist who wants to look at misbehavior of the US government, and whether that journalist is in Norway or Thailand or Antarctica or Australia, we're gonna get you. That's the message. We're gonna get you. We're going to torture you. We're going to audio surveil you. We're going to video surveil you. And you will not be able to do a damn thing about it. You're finished once we get you. Because we're the United States of America, we have this law. It applies to everybody, including you. Whether you're from Nairobi or you're from Brazil, we're going to get you. Now, think about the poll that will put, if it happens, on reporting of how about Cy Hirsch? What he has just reported is very delicate, very classified. why is he not being arrested? Why is he not being, well, I don't want him arrested. He's a good friend of mine. But, you know, the disparity with which, or the difference with which Julian has been treated speaks volumes. Now,
well, Cy Hirsch has just reported, Ray, that the U.S. Blew up the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Is that correct?
That's correct. Now, I would ask for a show of hands, or Harvey, maybe you can see everybody better, but would you raise your right hand if you know about that?
Ah.
Whoa. Has it been in the New York Times?
Yeah, I think so, but not steadily.
No, it hasn't. It's been in the Washington Post, which is a big surprise. And I don't think they're going to be able to suppress it forever, but it's not been in the Times or any other major media. I mean, the story is explosive, literally and figuratively. So Cy has done another bang-up job, so to speak.
Yeah.
And the
Cy
Germans,
Hirsch, of course, as everybody knows, did the My Lai story from Vietnam. One story we've covered, Ray, which I have not seen in the New York Times, is the uprising in Peru, where basically a full-blown revolution is underway, and it's nowhere in the American media, zero.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Well, yeah, the American media is kaput. So the one other thing I'll tell about Julian is one of the times I visited him, about the second time I think it was, Ed Snowden had been long since gotten out of Hong Kong. Some of you may have seen the movie explaining how. But I said to Julian, I said, you know, Julian, I really admire a lot of stuff that you've done, but nothing more than getting Ed Snowden out of that predicament. As many of you will know, Julian called in all his chips from everyone he knew in Asia, Australia, wherever. And through really imaginative work, they got him on that Aeroflot plane. And on the way to Moscow, he was deprived of his citizenship, but at least he was free. Ironic, isn't it, that he had to go to Russia to be free? He was ticketed on to Cuba, but he couldn't do that because, well, there were reasons. Anyhow, I said to Julian, I really admire that. And as I mentioned, Julian's sort of taciturn first person. He jumped off the couch and he said, yes, yes. He says, we had to make it possible for someone to do this gutsy thing and remain free. We didn't want to do a Chelsea Manning. We didn't want to do a me, cooped as he was, cooped up in the Ecuadorian embassy. So here's a guy who did something that the American government really doesn't like him for having done, and that is greasing the skids so that his Snow can get on the Aeroflot plane. And Ed, of course, is a free man. He's got 2 little kids now. I mean, it's a great story. He also was a friend of mine. We gave him the next Sam Adams Award for integrity. So what else can I say about Julian? Well, I just hope, that that things can turn out better than they seem to be turning out. It is the biggest event that has to do with press freedom. And if he's captured or if he's extradited and put in some big max prison in Colorado, that will be the death knell for investigative reporting.
Do you have a link or an organization that we should support and contact to
Sure.
do this?
Yeah, Assange Defense is a good website, and you could get in touch with the folks working on that here in this country. But you can just Google away, and you'll find all kinds of outfits that are trying to help him and his bride. They have 2 children now. The kids are beautiful. The elder one, the Irish would say, he's the spit of his father. We Americans say he's the spitting image of his father, right? Oh. He just looks like a little Julian. And they're dear kids, and they've been well with their father. So it's really a pity. But Neil Smeltzer has it all down pat. It's just that he couldn't convince anybody to do the right thing.
Well,
Now,
let's keep at it. At least he's still with us and alive. I'm going to call on Cynthia Papermaster. Cynthia is responsible, Ray, for your being on with us. She's with Code Pink in Berkeley. Go ahead, Cynthia.
Thank you very much.
Hello.
Yeah, I'm unmuted now. Hi, Ray.
hi, Cynthia.
Thank you for joining our Rage Against the War Machine last Sunday. Really appreciate that.
That was
Week
fun.
ago Sunday. Yeah. So I wanted to say that Julian Assange's father and brother are touring the United States with a documentary film that was made about John Shipton and about the Julian Assange case. I put a link in the chat to the tour dates. They're coming to San Francisco on March 1, this Thursday. There's still a few tickets left for the film, which is showing at the Roxy Theater in the Mission District in San Francisco. And a huge group of us is going there because we love the Shiptons, we love Julian, we love the father, and we've got to get him out of there. He's being tortured. So the United States the United States has to drop the case. And so my question to you, Ray, is where are we at with Attorney General Garland dropping the case against Assange?
I have a forlorn hope that he'll come to his senses. There could be a conversion of mind on the part of the real movers and shakers of the New York Times and other media. There's always a chance that people do the right thing. I don't want to raise up hopes too high, but there is hope. And we're hoping that they're coming to Raleigh, North Carolina, where I live now as well. And the film is terrific. You really have to see the film. What is it called? Ithaca. Yeah. So thanks, Cynthia. I think the last time we were together was out there in Nevada somewhere.
We were at Creech Air Force Base, just north of Las Vegas, protesting or just advocating for the end of the use of drone warfare. And that's going to happen in New Mexico this spring in April.
Mm-hmm.
So,
okay, for those of you just joining us, we're on with the great Ray McGovern, legendary whistleblower, former CIA guy. We're talking about Julian Assange. We're going to segue over to the 2024 election and then get into Ukraine and Afghanistan as we've not done before. Thank you, Cynthia Papermaster, for putting us in touch with Ray. We really appreciate it. Ray, you're welcome to stay as long as you want. We're just going to sit back and chew the fat, as it were. Stephen Kaiser, we have 78 people on the call. Stephen Kaiser, you have a hand, then Sandy, and then Mary. Go ahead.
No, I just raised my hand when Ray called on to raise some hands. I just haven't knocked it down yet.
Oh, okay. Well,
thanks for your good work, Ray, and you too, Harvey.
You too, bro. Thank you. Okay. Mary Butler. Mary Butler Stonewall, did you want to say something, Mary? Please.
Yeah.
And Sandy.
I just wanted to see if there was any like-minded. I wanted to do a raise your hand thing. How many people feel that the world people, the everyday person, no matter where you live on this planet?
I can't hear you. What happened?
Muted.
Go ahead. Unmute. Go ahead.
By those that are in charge in this world, because everywhere I look, it feels like there's a.
You keep getting muted.
I think Mary keeps muting herself. I'm not sure why that's happening. We'll get back to Mary when we work that out.
Mary, one more shot here. Don't mute yourself.
Sorry about that. My phone was doing it on its own. I was saying that it feels like we're in the midst of a Cold War, and it's the everyday human being on this planet against the governments and the corporations that are out there. It feels like everywhere I look, every country I talk to, they're having food shortages. They're having weird spills. They're having toxic clouds. They're having weird weather that they've never had before. It's like a constant barrage of attack. You know, whether it be disaster capitalism at its best, or literally that the world people are under attack. Does anybody else feel that way?
Does anybody not feel that way? I mean, yeah.
Yeah. So the question really is, what do we do about it, right?
Yeah.
Well, the thing that we don't do about it is nothing.
Right.
Now, Cesar Chavez comes from the area that some of you are from. And, you know, I remember quite well, he would propose a line of action. Let's say, I know what we'll do. Let's have a boycott. Let's have a grape boycott. And the people around him would say, oh, I don't think there are enough of us. There aren't enough of us, Cesar. And he would say, he would get sort of angry. He said, look, he says, there are enough of us, but without action, if we don't take action, nothing's going to happen. So a lot of us feel that there aren't enough of us. That's all right. You could feel that way, but you can't act that way. There are enough of us. We are the ones we've been waiting for. And, you know, we need to put our bodies into it. Now, I've done that a couple times. You don't get broken or you have to spend some time in prison for a little while. But, you know, when you look at the color of your skin there behind the bars, you say, oh, I'm going to get out of here. My friends will get me out of here. Some volunteer lawyer will come and get me out of here. It's not the same with the people in the next cell, okay? Point is, in my view, that those of you who I see have a little, even Harvey, you young fella, have a little gray in your hair, right?
Just
well, that's an advantage. That's a really big advantage. Why? Because, you know, when young people protest or rally, Americans tend to think, well, all right, they get beat up, they got to come into them. Look where they're not going to do. But old folks like you and me, Harvey, not you so much, but me, you get beat up, and people don't like that. Americans don't like that. So this is my little pitch for the elder generation. You got a big advantage, put it into play. Maybe the young people will take some encouragement from that and say, oh, these old guys, they've been around a while. They really care about this stuff. They're putting their bodies into it.
Well, I agree. My favorite line on that was from Ed Asner, who's a wonderful guy, Ed Asner, the actor. And there was a whole thing about would we all kneel for the national anthem? And Ed Asner said, I'll be glad to kneel for the national anthem, but somebody's going to have to pick me back up. Sandy Bolsenius, one of our regulars, but you want to talk to Ray McGovern here?
Yeah, I really want to see this film. I looked on the list and the link that was given, and I'm just wondering how can we get the film in our town? Who do we talk to? I'll have to talk to people here, but a number of them on this.
Yeah.
And before you guys, I just want to say something. I'm with Move to Men, where corporations are not people, money is not speech. We have to. This would clear up so much of the problems if
Right.
corporations didn't have it. And the fact is, we are winning, but that's why the news media is pounding on us so hard to not show what we're doing. So that's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let me, I took some notes, Harvey, as you said what I should talk about. So let me
give you, I want to introduce you to two real people real quick who are regulars, and they raise their hands. This is Ruth Strauss. She's a cardiologist in LA. And very opinionated and always got something great to say. Quickly then to Wendi, and then we'll let you go. I mean, we'll let you keep talking. Ruth,
Well, can I ask that one question about how can we get the film here?
Oh yeah, the film.
I think I can get it online.
Yeah, I think it is online.
Yeah. So
what's the name of it?
Ithaca
with a K.
Okay, thanks.
So yeah, by all means, and don't miss when it comes to the Bay Area. For God's sake, don't miss it. It's coming, as I said, to Raleigh as well. I have not met Julian's half brother or his father yet, but we have corresponded for a lot of time. So I'm really looking forward to meeting them. I have all my relatives in Raleigh coming to sitting in the front seat. So Harvey, you said I should talk a little bit about elections.
Yes,
and you
election
mentioned
2024. This is Wendi Lederman, who's one of the hosts of the show, and she wants to say hi. And then, yes, let's talk about 2024, and then we can cut loose on Ukraine and Russia. Go ahead, Wendi, and then Ray, please.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ray. It's such an honor. I'm a little starstruck, honestly. It's so great to have you with us.
Hi, Wendi.
Hi. So someone's asking about the film. I want to let you know that Vinny DiStefano, who's like the national coordinator for Assange defense, he's actually trying to join the call right now to meet you. He's with John and Gabriel, but he wanted to at least jump in and say hi, but he's stuck in an appointment. But if anybody that wants to maybe hold a screening of Ithaca can reach out to me, and I can help put them in touch with Assange defense, and they can do that. So just a couple things I'm hoping we can touch on. I know Harvey has the list, but I'm interested in the NATO expansion in Ukraine and that happening even before everything. And also what's happening in Atlanta with what you say about, you know, we've all seen you so heroically put yourself on that front line. And what does it mean with this whole Cop City thing now and the slaying of eco activists and just your take on that? And I feel like I had so much more because there's so much more. So hopefully you join us again. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendi. Okay, Ray. So listen, if you want to start with elections and take us to Ukraine, the floor and the world is yours.
Well, how much?
We got all day, so just take your time.
Okay. Now, thinking back to Iraq, when we veteran intelligence professionals for sanity warned again and again, starting in January of 2003, three memoranda to the young President Bush. There was a teach-in called by Peter Kuznick at American University. And they were really, Daniel Ellsberg, others were there. And he called me up and he says, "We'd like you to speak." And I said, "Well, what about?" He says, "About Iraq." And I said, "Well, how much time do I have?" And he says, 5 minutes. So, maybe we continue this conversation again, but let's make maximum use of the time here. Now, Wendi, you talked about what we can do and what I did in Atlanta. Well, you know, when our alcoholic friends run into real trouble, there's an intervention, right? Okay. Well, some of the good folks who live up in the Bronx, where I hail from, are now mounting interventions in all kinds of congressional scenarios, congressional offices, public hearings, and they are questioning people right up front about how they can avoid Cy Hirsch's article, how they can support continued killing in Ukraine. In other words, young people, and you can tune into this. Jose Vega, VEGA, is one of the leaders here. Look him up. He's done all kinds of really good interventions, and so that's one thing you can do. As for elections, this may be uncomfortable to some of you, but I have learned, well, let me say first, as my wife usually tells me to say, two things. My father was an FDR Democrat. The only time I saw my father cry was the day that FDR died. I was born and raised in the Bronx, where membership in the local union and in the Democratic Party were conferred at baptism. I mean, that's my heritage. That's where I come from. I asked my father, "Dad, what's the difference between a Democrat and a Republican?" And he said, "Oh, Democrats care about people." Not so much anymore. Not the Nancy Pelosi type Democrats. Now, Nancy Pelosi, pure and simple, should have impeached Donald Trump, should have impeached George W. Bush, for God's sake. I mean, okay, well, let me just say it this way. We're talking about elections. The 2016 and the 2020 elections were interfered with grossly. Now, you have all been told by the Russians. If you believe that, I have a bridge in Brooklyn I'd really like to sell you. It was interfered with by the deep state in cooperation with Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, the whole schmear of them. It was dishonest as hell, and mirabile dictu, Trump won anyway. How did they justify taking all these very illegal measures? Well, James Comey says it in his book. He says, I was operating in an environment where Hillary Clinton was clearly going to be the next president of the United States. Well, if you're sure of that, if that's the environment you're operating in, you're going to do all kinds of illegal things, which James Comey did, and expect to be rewarded for them, not indicted for them. Okay, so that's what happened in 2016. This Russiagate was pure and simple a fraud. And if you don't know that now, you should know it, because we have the Twitter papers that show that, well, show a lot of things. But we have, with respect to 2016, we have the head of CrowdStrike, the cyber firm that was given the task of looking into those DNC computers. Okay, I don't know why the FBI didn't send its own forensic people. Well, I guess I do know why. Anyhow, we all knew that the Russians hacked into the DNC, right? Well, guess what? On December 5th, 2017, the head of CrowdStrike was called to testify before the House Intelligence Committee. And Adam Schiff said, now, please, Mr. Henry, his name was Sean Henry. Mr. Henry, tell us how it was that the Russians hacked into the DNC computers. And Mr. Henry said, well, and his lawyer grabbed him by the shoulder and said, no. Mr. Henry said, sir, we have no evidence that anyone hacked into the DNC, not the Russians, not anyone. No forensic evidence. We never saw anything exfiltrated. Testimony under oath. That's why the lawyer had to pull him aside, okay? December 5, 2017. What did Adam Schiff do? Deep shifted. Deep shifted it. Deep sixed it, right? Okay. Now, when did it come to light? Well, many of you probably don't know that ever came to light. It came to light 2.5 years later, when Trump finally wised up to the fact that, you know, he was really president, and he could tell Adam Schiff to release that because, you know, so he got a new national intelligence director in, and that national intelligence director said, Representative Schiff, if you don't release that testimony, I'm going to. And so the next day, the day was May 7th, 2020 now, it was released together with a whole pile of other documents. Did the New York Times carry that story? No. Washington Post? No. Wall Street Journal? No. So if you don't know that the head of CrowdStrike, testified in December of 2017 that this whole Russian fraud, this Russian hacking was a fraud, then you're really deprived. You're really depending on New York Times and the Washington Post far too much. So 2020, come on, folks. Come on, folks. If you look at the Twitter files, you see that the FBI and the CIA were making sure that anything that favored Trump or prejudiced Biden was not allowed to air or even appear on social media. The New York Post, the oldest extant newspaper in this country, was silenced. My God. George Stephanopoulos asking Joe Biden, various questions for the last, quote, open house or debate. He forgot to ask him about Hunter's laptop. Worse still, John Brennan, former head of the CIA, had his minions go out and solicit the signatures of 51 former intelligence muckety-mucks, as my Irish grandmother would say, and they all signed and say, this is a Russian operation, this Hunter Biden's laptop. Don't pay attention to it. And so what? Did that help Biden? Of course it helped Biden. Would he have won anyway? I don't know. But my point is simply that everything is so damn corrupt on both sides, Republican as well as Democrat, of course. So, just go into that with your eyes open when you're working with elections coming up in another year or two. We don't have a lot of time left, but I'll say a couple of things about Ukraine. First and foremost, there's been a tectonic shift because of Ukraine. It's sort of the catalyst for this shift. And the shift has to do with what used to exist, the triangular relationship of Russia, China, and the United States. It used to be, see if I can do this right, it used to be sort of like an equilateral triangle, all right? Now it's a isosceles triangle, if you remember your geometry, okay? Russia and China with the long end, and US got the short end of the stick, literally and figuratively. These bright fellows in the White House have picked a fight with both other superpowers. They are in danger of getting us involved into a two-front war, and they have no idea what they're doing because they think they always have been exceptional. I'll just say this about the relationship between Russia and China out of the mouth of President Putin in Russia. He was asked in late October, what about this business where the US is picking a fight with China as well as being involved in shipping all kinds of weaponry into Ukraine? What do you think? And Putin said this is a virtual quote. He said, doesn't make any sense, does it? It's not rational. It strikes me as crazy, his word. Because, in the beginning, I thought there was some sort of subtle plan behind this, but I no longer think so. It's pure and simple arrogance and a feeling of impunity. Now, I don't agree with a lot of what Putin says, but I do agree with this. It's arrogance and it's impunity, and it's stacked Russia and China together against us. I will go so far as to say if there's a real dust-up in Ukraine or because of Ukraine between US and Russia, look for some real dust-ups in the South China, East China seas, across from Taiwan, whatever. So this is the precarious situation strategically that we have put ourselves in by virtue of these sophomoric, very well-educated, privileged elites who are advising Biden. It's really trouble deep because he has no real, he's got this, it almost sounds like the law firm of remember the one, Dewey, Cheatham and Howe? Okay, well, it's Biden, Blinken, Nolan,
Yeah.
Austin, and whatever. Yeah, it's Sullivan, of course. There isn't a sober brain in there, and I believe that to be reality. But it doesn't mean it doesn't matter what McGovern believes. It matters what Putin and Xi Jinping believe, and they have to prepare for the worst. And that's why the situation is so delicate and so difficult. And the situation brings us closer to a nuclear exchange than has ever been the case. And I've been around for 83 years. I used to hide under my desk, okay? So that's all I'll say about Ukraine, but there's lots more to be said, but I want to leave some time for questions and comments, or, hit away, folks.
So it was Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe. Those are the Mariachi brothers on Car Talk. That was a really great one. Myla Reason has had her hand up. Myla is a regular on with us. Go ahead, Myla.
Thank you, Harvey. So good to see you here, Ray. I'm just curious. When I don't think that any of us here believe that Russia alone had made the decision about who would be president of the United States. But I hope that you're not saying that Russia didn't play into it in certain ways. There were troll farms, there were Russian oligarchs who were funneling money into the Republican coffers via the NRA. Don't we know those things to be true? Didn't Maria Butina? I'm not saying they were wholly responsible. But they played a role. That's all I'm saying. And we are often talked down to and told that that we're assuming that Russia did more than they did. That's not my assumption. I just believe that they did play a role. And by saying, well, we know that, that the cards were definitely stacked against the system would not allow a Bernie to be president.
That wasn't the Russians.
But Russia did play a role, did they not?
Well, it was a great tragedy that the DNC was able to stack the deck against Bernie. That's why there was such an overreaction to what was called Russian hacking. You'll recall that Julian Assange publicized those emails from the DNC.
Sure.
Gotten not from hacking, but from a thumb drive, from somebody in the DNC. Anybody have any idea who that could be? Are there any candidates?
But that's not my question. I'm just asking you to tell me whether you believe that they played a role, that they had some influence, that there was some corrupt money coming from the oligarchs in Russia, and that they played a role.
I'm sorry, I don't agree. Such a role that they might have played was so marginal, and so it would have no real effect. And the big thing is that Obama himself, in September, October of 2016, told the James Clapper, head of the CIA, head of the intelligence community, Jay Johnson, who headed the Homeland Security, go ahead, make up this story about Russian hacking. And they did, and I can prove it. So the internet
and Russian oligarch money coming into the coffers of the Republican Party via the NRA has not influenced American elections in other Republican races. You don't think that that's a factor?
Another, sure, but you were talking about 2016. And the business about the Internet Research Agency, the emails, the Facebook stuff.
Sure, but it's well beyond that. That was just one factor.
Okay.
Well, it's pretty clear to me. Everybody is entitled to their own opinion. What we need is evidence of the kind that you're citing, and let's agree to disagree right now.
Great, Ray. Let's talk quickly on another piece of it. David K. Johnston and Craig Unger have both strongly emphasized the mob ties between the oligarchs who got out of the gulag in the 80s and 90s and laundered their money through Trump, how significant do you think the mob ties from Russia and Putin's role as mob boss played on? How does that play in with Trump himself?
I don't know. I guess the evidence is so overwhelming, and I've followed it so closely since September and October of 2016 that it's hard for me to say this, but Americans have been brainwashed for over 6 years now on Russia, and it's all fraudulent. And I wouldn't bother with it if it weren't consequential. I mean, Americans have been trained to hate Vladimir Putin and hate the Russians, and they're prepared to support whatever Biden decides to do in Ukraine. That's crazy. And so what I focus on is the real deal here. There's no evidence that, I'll go back one more step, and I would say, I've been watching Russian leaders since 1958, okay, when I decided to major in Russian. What I know about Russian leaders is they really hope and pray for one thing in a United States president, and that is consistency, sobriety, a kind of predictability. Now, from the very get-go, I had to be persuaded and I couldn't be persuaded that looking at Donald Trump, the Russians would want that kind of person with his finger on the button or on the codes or anything like that. I couldn't believe that. There's no proof that Putin preferred Trump. And there's lots of evidence, in my view, to say, Hillary Clinton was not his best friend, but at least she was predictable. He had a known quantity he could deal with. So, that's what I'm coming from here. And all I'm saying now is that people still don't know, for example, how most of your associates still believe that the Russians hacked into the DNC, I would imagine. Most Americans believe that those Facebook things from the Internet Research Agency amounted to anything. All this stuff is pure and out fraud. And what plays into this is what I call the Trump derangement syndrome. We all hate Trump so much that we will believe anything. Now, my wife always says, Ray, always tell him what you think about Trump. I think Trump was the very worst president the United States ever had or ever will have, hopefully. But that doesn't mean all this other stuff didn't go on, because now demonstrably it did. And the Twitter papers are the latest manifestation of this.
Okay, very interesting. I will take strong issue on one point, Ray, and I've sent you my history of the United States. By far, Woodrow Wilson was the worst president in the history of the United States. Not even close. And I'm 100% serious. So if you'll read my history of the U.S. in the period of World War I, you'll understand why Trump. Now, given a second term, Trump could probably have done worse than Wilson. But Wilson even had a pandemic of his own that killed more people than the COVID. So, but very interesting what you say. Let's call on Tatanka Bricka, who hasn't spoken yet. Tatanka is a mainstay of our program and is with the Christic Institute, Danny Sheehan in California. You probably remember Danny from Iran-Contra days. Tatanka, go ahead, please.
Well, thank you, Ray, for your life's work. Followed you a long time. I've mentioned to people here, after I worked on the election, attempted to get David Harris into the U.S. Congress in 1976, and the DNC called our primary election the best run in the country. We lost fabulously to Pete McCloskey. That was expected. Right after that, I had a couple that were the ideal campaign couple, invited me down to Stanford Research Institute. I was broke after the election, being a community organizer that worked with Cesar Chavez and helped found Amnesty International in the US. And anyway, 14 years of on-the-ground grassroots organizing. I was offered the best job I had ever been offered in terms of money, you know, 6-figure income, world travel, et cetera. I said, what is it you do? This is 2 weeks after the November election in 1976. I said, well, we're working in the Soviet republics, and there won't be a Soviet Union 15 years from now. And we are working on democracy in the Soviet republics, and they also have all these wonderful resources that will connect with our corporations. And you would be the perfect person to complete our Ukraine team. Now, I knew by this time that it was a CIA operation, but I wanted to get as much information as I could. So I said, please tell me more. I went in the next room and they showed me Ukraine and breadbasket and all the resources strategically located, et cetera. And I said, well, I know you have a 50-year plan. What is it? And they said a number of things, but the thing that struck me, now this is 1976, they said around the year 2020, we will very likely be at war with whoever is the president of Russia, now that Russia's been separated from all its ethnic provinces, and that NATO, which has been and they went like this, defensive alliance, will take its proper role. And they proceeded to talk about isolating Russia back into Europe so that we can face China. The corporations and the government, they do their long-term planning is in 50, 100-year chunks. And, you know, you go back to 1918 and the corporations in the US tried to overcome the Russian Revolution, you know, with a little help. And then you have FDR making agreements that get undone. And then you have the end of the Cold War and assurance that NATO is not going to be offensive. You have our entire lives. If I were anybody in Russia, you know, including the person who happens to be the president, you know, we're all a piece of work. Putin's a piece of work like we all are, but my gosh, you know, it's not difficult to understand if you look and understand this long-term planning that goes on. And I was, you know, if I only cared about the money, I might have been one of those people, you know, working with the Fourth Reich people in Kyiv. And oh, the one question I have for you is, what do you know about the 14 bioweapon labs that are against international law? And are some of them now in Greece? And was there a payment for that?
Are some of them now in Greece, you're saying?
Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't hear about that.
Okay.
You know, whether Victoria Nuland slipped in divulging those, or whether it's really hard to imagine she would have done that on her own, but it's pretty damning. And the Russians typically came up with pages and pages and pages of evidence from the labs themselves that they took over in Ukraine. But the UN hasn't done anything and won't do anything. UN is pretty much a creature of the United States. As a matter of fact, when I testified before the UN last Tuesday, I guess it was, at the Security Council, the Deputy Secretary General got up first and she said, now we're going to be discussing this report by Seymour Hersh about the fact that somebody blew up the Nord Stream pipelines, but we're not going to make any accusations, and we're not even going to do any speculation here. We're not going to do that. No. Then she turned to Professor Jeffrey Sachs, who did an incredible job. Maybe you saw it, of 10 minutes, 12 minutes setting the stage. And then all I had to do was pick up the pieces for my 17 minutes. So it was very apparent there at the UN that the Russians were up against a phalanx of folks that would accuse us of being conspiracy theorists, even though the best investigative reporter in the world had reported the story. Interestingly enough, the Chinese representative gave full support to the Russian position. He said, look, if the UN Security Council can't mount an objective, independent investigation of what happened under the Baltic, what good are we? They were saying, well, no, the Danes and the Swedes and the Germans, they're doing it. They say, leave it to us. We'll do a great job. And Professor Sachs had already shown, he says, look, the Swedes went right down in the water right after the expo, well, a couple of days later, right? And they did their thing and they know how to do it. They investigated. And when they came up from the water, what did they say? We can't tell you. It's classified. We can't tell our Swedish citizens. We can't tell our German neighbors. We can't. It's too sensitive. So we're going to depend on them. I mean, they knew about it, for God's sake. Look, Tsai is the best of the best. And the reason people come to him is because they know they'll be protected. He's never lost one of his best sources, okay? So people see this kind of act of war being plotted. People see these CIA operations, people saying, oh, what is good? Yeah, we can do this. This is going to be, okay? And finally they say, you know, God, I swore a solemn oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I think I'll go get in touch with Cy Hirsch and discharge that oath, that is, heed to it, and let people know what's really going on in this country, because people should know. And the last thing I'll say here is my friends in Germany emailed me last night to tell me there were 50,000 people in Berlin on Saturday protesting this thing. 50,000. Now, I was kidding with one person interviewing me earlier today. Well, you sure that figure? I said, well, the Germans are meticulous on those figures. They not only count all the people standing there, but they count all the legs. And then they divide by 2. And then they take all the one-legged and the no-legged people and they adjust for that. So yeah, 50,000. Well, all kidding aside, they were expecting maybe 10,000, okay? 10,000 is what the Ukrainians got a week before. So the Germans, what they know, or what they should know, is that when Biden got up on February the 7th of last year, and he said, we can do it if the Russians invade Ukraine, there will be no Nord Stream pipeline, right? Scholz, the chancellor, he was at the next podium. And the reporter from Reuters, she was bilingual. So she asked him in German, well, what about you? What do you say about this? I mean, this is your pipeline, right? And Olaf Scholz says, and this is quite interesting. Look at the whole video. He says, we do everything together. There's nothing we do with not being together. So together we will do these sanctions. Well, I mean, are the Germans so timid that they won't ask Scholz? Well, so you do it together? Did Biden tell you on the 7th of February last year that this was going to? Did he not tell you? Which is worse? The German economy is taking a real hit, folks. So I think terrible things, but some good things will come out of this imbroglio. And the sooner the better. My worry, and I just want to mention this before I forget, we get told, even by the head of the CIA, the head of the National Intelligence Setup, Avril Haines, that these months are going to be quiescent. They're going to be, while both sides refit, and then in the spring, the Ukrainians are going to make a big counteroffensive and take back even more land. My friends, nothing could be further from the truth. The Russians are on their way. They're going to reach the Dnieper River, my guess is within about 6 weeks. And then it'll be time to deal And if the U.S. isn't smart enough to deal at that point, well, it's just has to, because Russia doesn't want to take over all of Ukraine.
Ray,
You know?
Ray, I am so grateful for your analysis and for Code Pink. And I think one of the most important things that Medea brings when she talks about this need for sitting down is the very simple thing that this is not a negotiation, should not be a negotiation between Russia and Ukraine. It's a U.S.
Of course it is. Yeah.
Thing, and the Ukraine's caught in the middle like our entire frigging life.
Well, let me ask the other elephant in the room. There are those of us who are obsessed with nuclear power, and I was in Kyiv in 1996 for the horrific experience of the 10th anniversary conference on Chernobyl and what had happened to people there. I will say, there's two of the angriest and most effective groups I've ever met in my life were, number one, the Vietnam vets against the war, because they were so brilliant and so qualified and so fierce. And the other are the liquidators, the 600,000 people that the Soviets sent through Chernobyl to clean it up and then die from cancer. And when I was in Kiev, I met dozens of these guys who were just on their last legs, who just couldn't even say the name USSR or Chernobyl without spitting blood. So the question we have now, you got 6 reactors in Zaporizhia. I don't even know who's controlling Zaporizhia right now, the Russians or the Ukrainians. You got 9 other reactors in the country. Do you have any idea, what's going to happen to these reactors?
Well, the Russians very early on took over Zaporozhye, which is the biggest nuclear power plant in Europe. The Ukrainians have been shelling Zaporozhye. Now, it took a long time for the UN to say, okay, we'll send some inspectors there. And they did send them, and those inspectors had to be chaperoned. They had to be led by the Russians in charge of that area through the shelling. Now, they saw where the shelling was coming from. It was coming from across the river, for God's sake, where the Ukrainians were shelling from. Okay. Now, what was the UN report? Oh, we're not, it's not within our purview to decide who's doing the shelling. We just want to investigate. So here again, you have a UN body, in this case, the nuclear weapons inspectors, who are very firmly in the collective West camp, if you will. You won't get a straight answer from them. The Russians are pulling their hair out, This is terrorism. I mean, not only the reactor, but what do they call it? The effluent. Yeah. I mean, my God, yeah, no. All you have to do is hit that. And yet the shells keep coming. So what the Russians have been doing over the last few weeks is cleaning out that area and making sure that part of Donetsk is cleaned up from the Ukrainian forces. So, it's really very, what the Germans call labil, very delicate. And it's, what you're playing with is really high stakes here, because one errant missile could, and that's, yeah.
It's unbelievable. So that's, okay, let's Cynthia Papermaster, come on back in, and you got another question for Ray, or is your hand just stuck up?
It's not stuck up. First, I do have a question for Ray, but first I want to say I think it's Truman was the worst, because he actually used atomic weapons on an innocent population. And that kind of was the most evil thing I've ever heard of in my life. But the question I have for you, Ray, is to bring up your very practical plan for ending the conflict in Ukraine. Thank you.
Well, of all people, the Chinese came up with a plan, which they announced just 2 days ago. A prominent in that plan is a ceasefire and immediate talks. I come from New York. Talks, all right? Talks. That's what we used to do. That's how these things get resolved. Now, what's the fly in the ointment? Well, U.S. said, "Oh yeah, we want to talk, but first, Russia has to withdraw all its troops from the conquered lands."
I would
Well,
suggest Lockheed Martin is the fly in the ointment, just to add that. And what about the Pope?
well, as some of you know, I was interviewed by the biggest religious network, and that interview went to the Pope. And other people have been, Pax Christi and others have been trying to get the Pope to do something. Way back months ago, he said that he'd make Vatican offices available for negotiation. And I had hoped that, given the experience not too long ago in my lifetime, the experience of World War II, where the Vatican couldn't find its voice, where people like Albert Camus confessed to having pined, to have really sought a voice from Rome, that maybe Pope Francis, rather than just saying, "Oh well, you'll make our offices available," that he would come. And what I told him in my little message to him was, "Look, we remember when you came and addressed a joint session of Congress in 2015. It was great. One thing you said was the main problem is the blood-drenched arms traders. Do you remember? Remember that, Pope? The blood-soaked arms trade. And what happened? All those congressmen and all those... Then they looked in their pockets to find if the last envelope from Lockheed and the one from Raytheon was in there. I mean, was giving hypocrisy a bad name. And I said to the Pope, a lot of people are making a lot of money. A lot of people are profiteering on this war. So, it's not enough to say, oh, that's the main problem. The blood-drenched arms trade, got to do something. You got to at least tell your bishops and your pastors to spread the word about justice and about truth and what's really going on here. And the fact that so few people possess so much money and others are deprived, I'll say this because it's important to me. Back when Pope John the 23rd was Pope, he appointed some really good bishops. And the American Catholic bishops issued two statements, one on war and peace and one on the economy. And the one on the economy said, look, we Catholic social teachers brag about what we call the preferential option for the poor. Now that's a high-sounding concept, isn't it? We're going to tell you what it is. Here's it. No one is entitled to accumulate more wealth that he or she doesn't need when others are deprived of the bare necessities of life. That's the deal. That's what we mean by the preferential option for the poor. And it goes back to Hebrew times. It goes, the Islamists are on this to justice. Take care of the orphan, the refugee, the widow, okay? Don't build churches. Take care of these poor people. So, what has to happen is this needs to be preached from the pulpit. And if you lose people and if the collection plate isn't as fat as it should be, well, forget about it. Close the church. Get out there and help people who are being deprived of a decent life in this country because of warmongering and because of profiteering on armaments. Like the Pope said, let the Pope do what he said.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. Lynn Feinerman, also, Cynthia, I assume you said what you wanted to say. Lynn Feinerman, also in the Bay Area. Lynn has a radio show, Ray. Sometime when we do theology, I'll ask you how both you and Steve Bannon can be Catholic at the same time.
Harvey, I don't want to interrupt, but I just want to draw your attention. Ruth Strauss has had her hand up for a long time, and you had called on her, but she hasn't had an opportunity to speak yet. And she's probably been waiting longer than anyone.
All right, we'll go to Ruth and then Lynn. Okay. Thank you for that. And then Mary, Dorothy's joined us, and Wendi, you've got quite a following here, Ray. You're great. It's wonderful. And just relax. This is a rare opportunity. We have 61 people on the call, so and we're being live cast. So whenever you need to go, let us know, and we'll just take your time. Go ahead, Ruth, and then Lynn Finerman.
Mila, you are so sweet. Ray did it. I wanted to make sure he talked about his thoughts on Russia, and he did. So thank you, Mila.
Okay, thank you, Ruth,
Ray.
and thank you, Ray. Lynn Finerman, go ahead, Lynn. Lynn Finerman, are you unmuted? Let's get you unmuted here.
Yep.
Oh, there you go. Okay, Lynn, go ahead. Lynn Finerman? Sometimes it's
hello.
Yeah, there you go. You're good. Go ahead.
All righty. I have an
Hi, Lynn.
anecdote for hi. I have an anecdote for you, Ray. Back in the late 80s, it's per your quote from Putin about how insane the machinations and manipulations around this whole situation are. Back in the late 80s, I went to an ecology conference, Ecological Solutions. And there I met a fellow by the name of Oleg. I cannot remember his last name, but I wonder to this day if he became that gigantic billionaire oligarch. But no pun intended. His idea for this conference as a solution was to take the radioactive soil from Chernobyl and turn it into fertilizer. And to this day, yeah, no kidding. And you know, he had no poker face. And to this day, I wonder where that radioactive fertilizer went, number one, and whether or not Oleg actually was the Russian oligarch who became fabulously wealthy, and whether he did it on our food. And so what I'd like to say is that, you know, there's just a whole lot of insanity going on all sides.
That's true, and that's why we need interventions of all time. Jose Vega, Vega, Jose, look it up. But he's got all kinds of good interventions that he personally has done, and a lot of other young people are doing. So it's the wave of the future. I've done a few myself and got beat up for it. I'm sort of out of Washington now, but if I get an opportunity, I'll do it again.
Thank you, Lynn. Ray, since you have a JFK book behind you, I just want to confirm whether or not we can finally agree that Allen Dulles killed JFK, or is there any disagreement on that anymore?
Harvey, are you not afraid of being called a conspiracy theorist?
Well, just because there's a conspiracy theory doesn't mean there's not a conspiracy.
Well, you know, I don't kid here. Allen Dulles was really ticked off at President Kennedy. He didn't realize it. According to Dulles, John Kennedy was a upstart little Massachusetts kid, and Dulles knew all about the world. So when Dulles wanted to mount that Bay of Pigs thing, you know, Kennedy said, you know, this is really crazy, but if you want to do it, just realize I am not going to commit U.S. armed forces to bail you out. Well, you know how it ended. Kennedy kept his promise. That was a red flag for Allen Dulles. Kennedy was quoted as saying he wanted to to split the CIA in 1,000 pieces and scatter it to the winds. His brother, Bobby Kennedy, started to take a real interest in what the CIA was doing. So, long story short, that's the best book on JFK. It's JFK and the Unspeakable. I recommend you read it. It's about 12 years old now, if memory serves, but it profits from all the prior research. It's really, really good. The author is James Douglas. Now, what I was saying about Dulles is this, that after the assassination, LBJ thought it'd be a good idea if he'd let Alan Dulles run the Warren Commission.
Right.
Now,
at least he had a sense of humor.
Yeah, well, yeah. People say, wait a second, LBJ, wait a second, President. A lot of people think that the CIA had a lot to do with the assassination. Guess what they were called? Conspiracy theorists. So
right.
That's where the term really took off. If you thought that the established narrative about the killing of John F. Kennedy was not right, you were ipso facto a conspiracy theorist. Now, it's a long way of saying, I think that the CIA had a big hand in it. So does James Douglas. He says it pretty well. And, you know, the proof is in the pudding. There are documents that were supposed to have been released. Well, when Trump came in, after a year in office, he got up in the morning and said, oh, today's the day I have to release the rest of the FBI and CIA documents on the assassination of John Kennedy. In the afternoon, about 5 hours later, he got up and he said, the CIA and the FBI say these are too sensitive still. They shouldn't be released. So we'll revisit it in 6 months.
Right.
So McGovern makes a little note in his diary. 6 months later, and the media doesn't even ask about what happened to this stuff. So, you know, it almost seems as though they're hiding something, right? You know, hiding something. How many years after the assassination? So it's an institutional sort of thing. I think if the truth ever came out, that would be the end of the CIA. The FBI seems to be able to suffer whatever blows are attached to it, but you know, it's just, well, yeah. I think my former colleague played a role.
I guess the question we have to ask is, did the same person shoot John Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, and Martin Luther King? Was it the same shooter?
Not the same shooter, but the same government.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, we're gonna go Jeffrey very quickly. Mary, Dorothy, and Wendi. Okay, can we do this? Ray, you're really great. It's like sitting in a bar here, you know.
Having fun.
Yeah, I wish I could buy you a beer.
Well, me too. I'll take a rain check on that, Harvey.
Well, I'll be in Roanoke one of these days. You never know. I thought Roanoke. Oh no, you're in Raleigh. You're in Raleigh.
Raleigh, right? Yeah.
I think we mentioned Raleigh was just voted, because you're there, was voted the second best city in the country to live in after Ann Arbor, where I went to school, and I would go back in a heartbeat. So Jeffrey Bartow, real quickly, please. Then Mary and Dorothy. Okay, if you're not unmuted, I'll unmute Mary and I'll unmute Dorothy. Go ahead, Mary, while we try and unmute Jeffrey.
Yeah, I just wanted to have the gentleman's opinion on that Putin is basically a figurehead to the militant government that's in charge, only based on the fact that, just a hypothetical, that when shortly after Putin served his first term, he spoke of not running again and retiring, and he was actually threatened that his wife and children could have an unfortunate accident if he did. So I feel that he's just slipped into the role that he has to play, and is nothing more than a figurehead for the militant government that is serving their own objectives.
Ray,
well, Thanks very much. I would love to see the evidence behind that. It doesn't seem to me that it's correct in any way. I see Putin as being firmly in charge. I see him as trying to defend his country from what he sees as an existential threat coming from the US and NATO in Ukraine. And if you look at the Russian people, the vast majority of them see that the same way. He has an approval rating of about 80%, and it's not just the media there. It's the truth of what he's facing and how he's facing into it.
Well, here's another who's in charge one for you. It's historical. There's some debate, but not much, that by the end of his term, Ronald Reagan was really out of it with Alzheimer's, and that Nancy Reagan was really running the country, at least to the extent that she's the one who made peace with Gorbachev.
No way. Ronnie liked to personally deal with people. He found Mikhail Gorbachev, somebody he could deal with. They almost, in Reykjavik, they almost came to an agreement to abolish all nuclear weapons. But then some people on the White House staff said, well, whoa, what would happen to Star Wars then? What would happen to be our national defense system? These were the people like Raytheon and Lockheed making lots of money out of things that would never work, and they never will work, okay? So, you know, it was really a tragedy that Reagan had the right instincts. He did come to agreements, and so did his successors on limiting, actually destroying a whole class of nuclear-tipped missiles, intermediate range ones in Europe and Russia. But the deal almost got struck, but the military, industrial, congressional intelligence, media, academia, think tank complex put the screws on Reagan and said, no, you won't get your Star Wars. That they had persuaded him that they could create an impenetrable shield around the United States. It was stupid from the get-go, could never be done.
Right. So the idea that Nancy Reagan was running the country at the end, like Edith Wilson ran the U.S. in 1920.
No way. No,
Okay.
she was busy running the Just Say No campaign. That didn't work real well either.
Yeah, she did do that. There's no doubt about it. Okay, Dorothy and then Jeffrey.
Hi, Ray. You know, last time I saw you was at the Topanga Peace Alliance a million years ago.
Uh-huh.
Julie Levine and company. Yeah. So it's good to see you again. I'll tell you a funny, you know, years ago, The Intercept had an article that I read, and I never could find it again. And it recounted how the money, the investment advisors were talking to the arms manufacturers, trying to, you know, because they were going to make up their thing, advising people where to invest, etc. And they were complaining that it looked like the money managers were complaining that the wars in the Middle East were seeming to wind down a little bit. And the
what was winding down? I'm sorry.
The wars in the Middle East.
The Middle East wars.
In the Middle East. Okay, got it.
So
Business was going to turn south.
So the arms manufacturer, you know, told them not to worry about a thing because when the Middle East is over, there's always the Far East. So I've been waiting, and here we go. And I guess the Ukraine was kind of a nice little interlude while they're trying to start a war with China. I can't see how this could be. Half of our manufacturing is in China, so it seems to be a very, very untenable situation, to say the least. But we're in the business of war. When people ask me why are we giving money to, you know, selling arms to Egypt and Saudi Arabia and all these horrible actors, I say, because that's what we do. That's our business. We're in the business of war. We're in the business of funding it and use up the weapons, because otherwise we won't need to make more weapons. So it's a very unfortunate thing. I don't know if the world's going to survive. War is bad for the environment, even. And never mind how many people are killed.
Well, yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because in a way, you all know what opportunity costs are, right? I mean, that's a fancy word the economists use. Well, I've described the Ukraine imbroglio as the mother of all opportunity costs. I mean, let's face it, we don't have all that much time. Everything is diverted, all attention is diverted there. We're even blowing up pipelines and putting all kinds of nasty stuff in the air. I mean, so if we ever, well, it looks like we'll never will come together with China and Russia and everybody else that has to cooperate because, you know, this is the only planet we have that I know of. And so the opportunity cost is huge. And I have 10 grandchildren. I care about them. Don't these other people have grandchildren? I don't know. I just can't understand it. So it's really important. The opportunity costs, the climate change and all that kind of stuff should be mentioned in any discussion of this kind of thing.
Absolutely. And, you know, the whole war in Ukraine could have been averted if Europe had gone to renewable energy a long time ago. It's interesting. You mentioned Germany. Germany had 19 reactors. They're down to 2 or 3 now. And everybody was yelling and screaming. But France has 56 reactors, more than half of which are shut for internal generic problems. And France, with 56 reactors, is importing energy from Germany that has 3. I think that tells you the future a bit. By the way,
Planning 100% nuclear. That was their grand plan.
that was the grand plan, right? And we have Diablo Canyon looking at us. If you happen to be an acquaintance of Oliver Stone, and if he wants to do a debate on nuclear power, I'd love to have it with him. Oliver Stone, for some reason, is now supporting nuclear power. And it's
almost to promote nuclear power, yeah.
It's really crazy. So, you know, you've got my contacts. If you run into Mr. Stone, please let him know.
Stone almost, what a thought.
Really. Okay, Jeffrey, and then Wendi, and then Julie. And we'll go ahead. Jeffrey, go ahead very quickly.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Ray?
Yes, I can, Jeffrey.
All right. All righty. I know I don't have much time, but I'm gonna explain this idea I have that could probably help Julian Assange get out of prison. It's called journalcide. Called Crimes Against Journalism. You know. So you can't
like that.
The idea is to protect journalists, especially investigative journalists, from places when they go.
So what you're saying, Jeffrey, is that Julian Assange is a victim of journalcide.
If he's in prison getting tortured and all that to not receive fair treatment, then yes, that is journalcide.
Thank you. That's a good one. We like that. Thank you, Jeffrey.
What do you think, Ray McGovern?
Ray?
It's a good word. I'll have a chance to use it here and there. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Jeffrey. Wendi Lederman, go ahead, Wendi, with Ray McGovern.
Thanks so much. We so appreciate you staying with us, and we're all thoroughly enjoying this. I just have a couple of quick points, and I do have a question. I'll try to be very quick. One, I want to just draw the correlation with something you were saying before, but I think it was the investigations with Russia was led by Mueller, who happened to be the same guy who told us to go ahead into Iraq because we have the nuclear or the weapons that we sold him, the biological. I wanted to make that point. And I think we would love it if you came back sometime to go into more detail about the interventionism that you're speaking of and just how to do that. I think we'd all love to hear that more on another time. And so I do have a question. I'm going to set up a little bit of a context for a question that hopefully you'll be comfortable discussing. But so we talk about nuclear a lot, and we see this huge billions and billions of dollars that we're not even seeing really going into funding the nuclear energy, which will in turn fund nuclear weapons. We have the expansion of NATO bringing in new countries, but at the same time, we have what's going on with Syria, and they're in an earthquake, and Israel is bombing the crap out of them while we're funding them. And so Iran is supporting Syria, and that's getting in with China. So we have all this strategic things happening in the background, right, that are seemingly unconnected. So with that context, if you're comfortable speaking, basically, just a simple question: how would you explain the significance of Nord Stream and what that is and what that means, and perhaps how that ties into any of the context there? But for anyone who doesn't understand what that was, if you could explain that. Thank you so very much. Appreciate you.
Oh, you're most welcome. Nord Stream is really big stuff, okay? The reason the German economy was able to blossom was cheap gas, okay? Cheap gas from Russia. How did it come? Through Nord Stream 1, built in 2011, and then Nord Stream 2, which was ready, which was completed about 2021 or so, but the Germans were persuaded to put the lid on it. No, don't let Nord Stream 2 work yet. They have to get permits and all this stuff. So the U.S. looked at this as the U.S. policymakers as a terrible danger. You're making Western European countries dependent on Russia in a very big way. Okay. Now, in the old days, back in the day, I would be really concerned too, because the Russians were trying to take over the world. Guess what? The Soviet Union imploded. Okay, there's not a scintilla of evidence that the Russians want to take over Germany or France or even. Have you been in the Baltic countries? I have. I don't know why it would. So, is Russia still an expansionist, aggressive nation? The answer is no. Putin wanted to build up the country after his predecessor Yeltsin drank away his life, his government, and gave the real oligarchs, both East and West, a major plundering job on what was left of the Russian economy. So, what am I saying here? I'm saying that that pipeline was the lifeblood of German industry, and it also, not only Germans, they would sell the extra gas to other European countries. So the notion that it would be sabotaged. Now, we know that the CIA and Biden and everybody else knew that it was possible to blow them up, okay? They knew that turn of the year, right? The turn of beginning of 2022. Why did they not do it until September? Well, what was happening in September? Guess what? Don't tell anybody. But the Germans were talking to the Russians on the QT and saying, oh my God, it's going to be really cold this winter. And we don't want our industries to go kaput and lack the kind of gas that makes them really efficient. So they were dealing. It looked like there might be a deal between Germany, most important country, France, maybe, with the Russians to sort of give them a waiver on some of the sanctions. Okay. Now, this was reported. Pepe Escobar was among the people that reported this. Now, this was not lost on the US government. What would happen? How do you rein in the Germans? Well, you blow up the pipeline. My God, if someone told me that that's what our government did, that would be hard to believe. But, lots of stuff is hard to believe. That's what these Arschlöcher did, okay? And now the German people are trying to just get control of this and say, well, should we believe Cy Hirsch or should we not? Well, when they look at his record and when they look at their circumstances, they're going to believe it. And that 50,000 that demonstrated in Berlin on Saturday, I think that's going to grow. I think the hope is there because, there's a expiration date on U.S. hegemony, including U.S. hegemony in Europe. It's been, 78 years since the war. More important, in a German kind of way, it's been exactly 90 years. What's today? Oh, today's the 27th. Exactly 90 years to the date when their parliament was blown up Okay. A lot of people think that was a kind of false flag, a sort of a provocation by the Nazis, whatever. They blamed it on the communists, and the Nazis, who only had about 44% of the vote or of the parliament, all of a sudden were able to instigate extraordinary measures, snooping and surveillance and round up people, okay? And what happened? Well, we know the rest of the story. The Democrats, yeah, the Social Democrats caved. So did the Centrum Party, the Catholic Party, and nobody stood up to the Nazis. And we know the rest of the story. So here is the Reichstag spot, the burning of the Reichstag, exactly to the date, February 27th, 1933, and we've been exposed to the blow up of the World Trade Centers and all that kind of stuff, and the draconian measures, the extraordinary measures that were implemented. So there are similarities in history that we should heed. And what I'm saying is that the Germans did not stand up. The good Germans, there are a lot of good. I spent 5 years in Germany. I have a lot of good German friends, okay? But they didn't have the muscle or one of the lawyers that was there at the time called it sheepish submissiveness. That's how they acted. Now, here it is, 90 years later. The war has been over for 78 of those 90 years. Is it still the case that the German people are going to be guided by sheepish submissiveness? I don't know, but I'm hopeful that this time around they'll stand up by their own two legs, demonstrate, and finally get rid of those very, very strange people. First and foremost, the foreign minister who says we're already at war with Russia.
Wow. Thank you for that. Julie Weiner is one of our regulars from New York. Ray works on election protection. We'll go till 5 if you want.
That's fine.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead, Julie. That's 8 your time. Julie, you're still muted here. Let's see.
I wanted to ask.
Thank you. Yeah.
Go ahead. Ray, what'd you say?
I just want to ask a favor of all of you. None of you teach my wife how to mute me, okay? I should very much like to kind of have a button to mute me. So nobody tell my wife.
I can unmute you, don't worry.
Sorry about
Thank you
that.
so much. Thank you, Ray.
We don't want to unmute you. It's such a pleasure having you here and seeing you face to face. This has been a delight. Well, I had 2 questions. I put both in the chat. One is, what do you make of the Ukrainians watching the rehearsal for the Zelensky presidency on TV and then electing him? And maybe that's a silly question. Maybe it's sort of obvious, but, and then the other one is really whether you think that the Ukraine war, or rather the US provocation of the Ukraine war, is actually aimed against Western Europe. To destroy not just Russia, but Western Europe as well, to decrease their power in the world.
Well, let me take the first. Zelensky campaigned on a platform of making nice with Russia.
Wow,
that was his big thing.
Wow.
He was gonna calm things down and make nice with Russia. I don't know if he believed that or not, but as soon as he went out there to the Donbass and tried to tell those neo-Nazis to knock it off, stop shelling the Russian-speaking population, they told him, hey, this is really very clear. They said, who the hell are you? And he said, well, I'm your new president. I said, get out of here. He got the message very quickly. He's not his own man. He has to defer to these neo-Nazis. So that's the tragedy in all this. He was elected on a platform where most Ukrainians wanted to kind of do a deal. And the hard right, the extreme right, the Russians call them neo-Nazis, and there's a great deal of truth in that. They prevented that. Second part of your question, yeah. Well, the U.S. doesn't want to lose Western Europe, and there are troglodytes, people who think that that Germany and Russia getting really close together would be a strategic threat to the United States.
Yeah.
You know, in the old days, that sure as hell was a problem. These days, you know, the Russians want to have a decent life, and they want to not be threatened by the same kind of missiles along their periphery that John Kennedy wouldn't allow the Russians to put in Cuba.
Yeah.
Let me leave you with that analogy. It's an apt analogy. Most people don't know the holes in the ground that are already in Romania and Poland. Biden promised not to put them in Ukraine and then reneged in talking about them. So those capsules already in there, they can be put, the cruise missiles can be put in there, hypersonic missiles can be put in there, giving Putin cruise missiles 7 to 10 minutes launch to target. If they're hypersonic missiles, 5 minutes. Now, do you think it's unreasonable for Putin not to want to be put into the position of having to decide within 5 minutes or even 7 to 10 minutes whether to destroy the rest of the world? I mean, I don't think that's unreasonable at all.
Either he's unreasonable or Kennedy was unreasonable.
No, Kennedy.
Well, that's right. Yeah, Kennedy did illegal things. I mean, he called it a quarantine, but it was a blockade. There was an invasion force in Key West, and he threatened nuclear war. You're not supposed to do those things, but according to the UN. So nobody said, Kennedy, this is not provoked. What are you going off half-cocked here? Come on, Kennedy. Nobody said that because it was provoked. And if I could leave you with that thought, the notion that what Putin did in invading Ukraine exactly a year ago, the notion that was unprovoked, well, again, I could show you that that's quite a wrong notion, but no Americans have been exposed, or very few Americans.
We forget.
Yeah, well, they don't know.
Of course, for the future of the world, the real question, of course, it's interesting to talk about Germany hooking up with the Russians, but when the Chinese hook up with the Russians, that's another world. And nobody seems to want to mention India. Actually, India has now surpassed China in population, or is about to. Mm-hmm. So, and there was an incredible article in the New York Times last couple of days, you probably saw it, about the Belt and Road Initiative and the infrastructure that the Chinese are building, basically coast to coast. I mean, what the Americans did on the North American continent of linking it with railroads and all this other stuff to build the infrastructure for the American century, the Chinese are doing now from Japan to England with a total infrastructure that's going to dwarf us. I mean, we're going to be a fly on the back of the elephant, as far as I can see. You're not disagreeing with me.
No, I think, well, you know, that's the future. The Chinese, the Indians, the Iranians, Russia, they're all going to be connected in a way that the West will pretty much be excluded. And that's the big, we're talking, you know, 10 years from now, that's going to be the big deal. You know, very fast trains. It's amazing what already exists in China, and we can't have it here. We have other problems with trains, don't we?
Yeah, it's quite amazing, actually. Ray, you've been fantastic. Ruth Strauss, you have a last quick question, and then we're going to let Ray go before his wife kills him.
Okay, thanks. I just heard this today, completely off my radar. It was on our local.
I'm not hearing well. Ruth, could you speak a little
quickly, Ruth,
from the mic?
Okay.
Okay.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Better. Better.
Okay. So I just heard this on our local progressive radio station today that Biden, and I did check it out, Biden had sent billions of dollars, I believe, to Azerbaijan, who are slaughtering the Armenians, but that he was doing that because they have an oil pipeline that they can give to Europe. But really and truly, that oil pipeline is really a laundry for Russian oil. So it was kind of convoluted, but it was interesting politically. And I just wanted to see what your take was on that.
Yeah, I don't really have a take on that. When I don't know, I say that I don't know. Harvey, could I leave you all with on a lighter note?
Of course. Well,
now you have to realize I'm from New York, right? And so we tell ethnic jokes, and anybody who doesn't like ethnic jokes should not listen, okay? But when Biden, this is apocryphal, okay? When Biden was in Poland, he heard about the first Polish astronaut, and he wanted to interview him. So his staff, crackerjack staff, went and listened to Mr. Kowalski, the first Polish astronaut. And there was a press conference, and he said, "We are going to do something for the first time in humanity. We are going to launch in 1 month and land on the sun." And so that's Twitter, laughing. So one of the AP people said, "Now, Mr. Kowalski, don't you think it will be a little warm on the sun?" He says, "I'm glad you asked that question. We're going to go in the nighttime." Now, the White House staff checked it out and Googled the hell out of it and decided they wouldn't let President Biden go to talk to the first Polish astronaut. That too is apocryphal. Hey, what's not apocryphal is how much I've enjoyed this conversation. So be well, keep fighting. Adelante, adelante, adelante.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you so much, you guys. Ray, this will be available. It's all been recorded, so it'll be available if you want to refer anybody to it at our website. And I got your email. I'll email that stuff.
Yeah, good.
Everybody will be back again next week. Same time, same place, unless they call another President's Day. This is fantastic. Ray, keep up, and we'll be in touch. Take care, everybody.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Adelante and si se puede.
Si se puede.
And say hi to your wife. Thank your wife for us.
And give peace a chance.
Yes, you got it. All right, folks. We had 50 people right up to the very end. So there you go. Take care, guys.
Thanks.
We'll see you soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Next week.
Great job, Sluggo.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Steve, Wendi, Maya, the whole crew is really fabulous. Now I need to go get a beer. If only I drank beer.
That was amazing. Thanks, everybody. I guess I'm the host, so I guess I'm going to go ahead and pull the plug. But
okay.
Really,
All right. Take care, Wendi.
Yeah.
Thanks, Wendi.
Thank you, everyone. That was just so wonderful. I can't wait to have Ray back. And
yeah, Steve, thanks for getting them on in the pinch there.
Yeah.
And the new link worked great. So fantastic.
Yeah, I had a little bit of trouble. I don't know if it was my computer or what it was, but it took me like a good 10 minutes to, like, it kept looping me from launch to open to launch to open. I text Steve, but then it finally worked, but it might have just been.
You might have to
there was
update
one
your Zoom
woman who-
install.
Were you going to say, Milo?
There was a woman who had reached out to us who emailed me and said she couldn't get in, but I wasn't able to help her. But maybe she'll be able to get in next week. She's a great activist from New Mexico who reached out to Harvey and I about wanting to sign the petition to shut Diablo. So
well, real quick, Milo,
we'll bring her.
Milo, hold on just a second. Everybody needs to make sure you have the newest Zoom install. And if Zoom asks you to update, you need to update, because if you don't, then you often have trouble getting on.
Oh, that's good to know. Thank you. I will reach out to her. I just didn't have time. I saw her message kind of way late. I was late for the Zoom myself, so I'll contact her and make sure she knows that.
Harvey, I want to thank you for, because I met Linda Seeley on your call. And when I called her up to tell her we're moving this week down to Atascadero, we're going to be neighbors, she just was overjoyed. She said, welcome. I'll give you 3 days and then we're going to have you over for dinner and I'll introduce you to all the peaceniks in the area. So thank you.
Good. So did you?
That's great.
Well, we moved it because of all the rain today. We're moving on Wednesday.
All right. She's great, man.
So that's good. And one thing, I didn't want to raise my hand again because it went so late, but I wanted to ask Ray, because I had the sense in 1976 when I learned what I learned, that those neo-Nazis in around Kyiv and throughout there were the ones that our CIA was working with. So that provocation from the right could very well have been a U.S. provocation. I wanted to ask him his opinion on that.
I've got his email.
Okay. I'd love to write him.
All right, I'm sure I'll be glad to hear from you.
Okay. All right.
That was really great, guys. So
yeah, that was wonderful. Yeah. Thank you, everybody who helped get him on.
It was Cynthia.
Yeah,
So
that was energizing.
she made the connection.
Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you, Wendy.
Anybody have a major guest they want to bring on next week, let me know. I'll actually be in transit, so it's going to be.
You know what? He probably doesn't have time, but it's the first time in history. Danny said on last Wednesday night that there is a law now that all the Defense Department, Pentagon, intelligence agencies need to report to this new office being set up on all the UFO activity and ET activity that they've got in their possession. So Danny's been asked to provide like an oversight of the people that are going to get the information to make sure we get the information. Anyway, and it is I asked him today if this is a result of his work with Luis Elizondo, his client, and his meeting with the Pentagon. And he said, oh yeah, this is exactly what, I wrote the thing that became the law. So that's interesting. That's very interesting. And
Tonka, yeah, reach out. And if he has time, it'd be great to have him.
Okay.
But if not next week, then maybe in a couple weeks after that. What do you think?
He also made the case for what the ET situation has to do with global climate change, the direct connection, and the implications if this information really gets out, if the world understands that we never do not need the oil wars, that we've had free energy since the Eisenhower years, et cetera. It's quite a conversation to have, but we can open it. I'll ask him.
Absolutely.
Oh, sorry. And I know Sarah Nelson, Danny's wife, obviously, she has that movie coming out about the Silkwood case, which was like drawing the correlations between
that's going to be quite a while before that's out, but
yeah, but I'd mentioned it to Danny about you guys connecting about having her on to talk about it, because it has to do with like weaponizing nuclear energy, basically. So I think Danny
we are going to continue with this Wisconsin thing. We do need to get people on the ground there, and we will continue also with the referendum idea. So just a lot going on, guys. This is
Andrea
great.
was wonderful. She's great, right to the point.
She was quite loose today. It was good.
Yeah, it was very
but
good.
Ray wasn't with us. And has anybody heard from Joel Siegel?
I heard
have.
from him. Yeah, I've heard from him a few times.
How's he doing
lately? He seems real tired. I'm sure he'd appreciate a call, just somebody calling, saying hi.
Well, I've been calling. He has to call me back. So.
Oh, okay. What was the last time you tried? Because for a while he was under the weather. He was.
I called him earlier yesterday, and we haven't seen him on the call. So
yeah,
if he does turn up, and at some point also, Mila, I think we need to devote a major segment to Pacifica. So when the time is right, and everybody should know our good friend Jerry Manpro is in the hospital, and we should send him, as they say, thoughts and prayers.
All
right, you guys, this has been great.
Harvey.
Thank you. We'll see you next week or in between.
Okay.
Yep.
Bye.
Thanks so much, everybody. Take care.
Take care.
Love you all. Thank you.
Love you all.